Today was the first day of the trial for Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd case, and trial is being delayed because the judge wants to add another murder charge. Basically, they want to add, I think it's third-degree murder to Chauvin's list of charges, which is serious because a lot of people think that second-degree murder won't stick. They overcharged him. Basically, you have to prove he wanted to kill somebody, and that's going to be very, very difficult to prove. But let's be real. Even with third-degree murder, manslaughter is going to be hard enough to prove as it is. And a lot of people think Chauvin will actually be acquitted. Now, it all comes down to politics. If politics plays a role in this, he could be convicted of all counts, or he could be found not guilty on all counts because they don't want the cop to go to jail for this. I think realistically, there is a good possibility of a manslaughter charge sticking. But then you have the fact that the Minneapolis Police Department actually trains their officers to do exactly what Chauvin did. So by all means, criticize the department, say you don't like them for doing that, but can you blame the individual for doing as he was trained to do? That's where things get sticky. In the end, I don't care. I don't think it matters what happens. They're going to riot. So, we'll talk about that. We got a couple other stories. We got Andrew Cuomo facing impeachment because there's a lot of things that guy did wrong. Killing people and then grabbing that woman's whole head and squeezing. I love this. They said, Cuomo gave out a statement saying, "I did not inappropriately touch any woman." And there's a photo of him just grabbing this woman's head. It's like, bro, you grabbed her whole head. I don't know. It's inappropriate. If he was touching her arm, I'd be like, well, no, you grabbed her whole head. And then we have this, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Burger King tweeted, "Women belong in the kitchen." That's them. I didn't say that. That's not my quote. Burger King tweeted that women belong, and Burger King said this, in the kitchen. Straight quote. So we'll talk about all that. We are being joined today by classically trained actor Clifton Duncan. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Clifton Duncan. Hello to all my new friends out there. I am a Broadway veteran and one of the few actors that people seem to want to listen to these days when I talk about politics and current events. How strange is that? That's the most I've accomplished in my career is creating a Twitter account, and it's a very dubious accomplishment, but I'm riding the wave right now.
I like to say Twitter is pointless, but I guess, here you are, I suppose. It puts you on the political stage in a matter of speaking.
It's very strange. It's very strange. I started because I had an account before, and I had an anonymous account where I said, this is what I really think. And I was like, my public account, I'll use that for work. But my problem is that I just can't shut my mouth. And at a certain point, especially when things began to fall apart in 2020, I began to really freak out, and I said, I have to say something. Someone has to do. And honestly, it was your rant last year. It's one of the reasons that I'm sitting here right now.
Oh, wow.
And you were like,
I
didn't do that. Yeah, well, your censor of it was hilarious in the clip. Like, Huck! But but I said yes, because I'm not going to get into it, but I've experienced in my life that when people see something wrong, there's nobody. They always say someone should do something, someone should say something, and then but no one ever does, and that someone should be you. So I'm messaging James Lindsay. He wrote back to me, and then I ended up meeting up with Carrie Smith, who
cool.
She just happened to be driving from Texas to somewhere else, and we met up in Atlanta, and things kind of took off from there, and I just began just saying what I really think, and Twitter, for all its uselessness and vitriol, it kind of caters to my strengths, which is like being a smart aleck and being able to write with a little bit of flair. And
I feel like there's actually more and more people who are not conservative but are about freedom and free speech and humor. This politically homeless space is getting bigger.
Yeah.
More and more people are coming into it. You especially.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating because I have private conversations with people in my industry and outside of it, in New York and in other places, who say, yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying, but I go, and like you, I began to become irritated because I do have sympathy. You have things that you want to protect in your life. You have a livelihood. You have a family that you want to provide for, but at the same time, it's. I think 2020 has demonstrated our mass inability to do a really good and mature cost-benefit analysis. So what's worse, you losing your job right now, or you continuing to allow these things to perpetuate? And what kind of world will your children live in? A world where they can't say what they really feel, where they have to keep lying about things that we know are obviously true.
It's a 1984 world where you're looking at a picture of a blue square and you keep telling everyone it's a red
It's
triangle.
a red circle.
Or, yeah, a red circle. And then you know deep down, you're like, I know that's not true. But if I say otherwise, that is an insane way to live.
Well,
insane way
one
to
of the
live.
most devastating lines I've ever read in all of literature is the final line of 1984, where he says, he loved Big Brother. And I feel like, I shouldn't say this, but I'm well on my way to cancellation anyway. Might as well say it. But that's what I feel like, because now, at least in my industry, you go and you do a meet and greet at the first day. People say, well, say who you are and what your role is and what you're here for, and also share your pronouns. And I feel like if I do that, now I have no problem if someone wants to be addressed in a certain way, but don't compel me to do that. And I feel like if I do that, then in a way that's me saying, well, I love Big Brother. I'm going along with this ideological bent that I don't really understand and that I can't embrace fully. I have serious issues with that. And
you can always culture jam and
Culture
say
jam?
like, my pronouns are alilala and la 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 la, and then when they ask you to repeat it, be like, you didn't ask anybody else to repeat it. So like, I agree with you. If someone, if somebody has particular pronouns, I don't care. I'll call you. I'll address you as you want to be addressed, because I'm seeking to communicate with you and trying to build a certain level of respect.
Yeah.
But if someone asks of me, it's like, oh, you don't want to ask me to play these games, like to engage in this stuff, because I just get weird with it.
Well, it's also like, is there really any mystery as to what pronouns I might go? I'm 6'3" with broad shoulders and a baritone voice. Are you really confused?
Caesar?
No, Tim.
Huh.
That's a nice attempt, but it doesn't quite fit. Not quite.
Him? Did I get it that time?
That works for me.
All right, there we go.
Is that
There
him
we
with
go.
a Y?
It's like a warm glove. It fits
It's
perfectly.
HXM.
Okay.
Him.
It's too much.
All right.
Zim.
Let's we also got Ian. He's
Yeah, hey everybody.
There's Ian.
Ian Crossan, what up? What up, Clifton?
What? No, okay. You said hello to everybody else, but when you're talking to
Oh,
me,
snap. I see how
I'm
it
getting
is.
real with you.
you're trying to ingratiate
That's how I
yourself
communicate.
to me.
That's
By the
right.
way,
Yes, sir.
before we came on air, this is hilarious. Like we were talking about how I don't know why, but only leftists seem to automatically see black people whenever there's an ape or a gorilla or something.
What the heck?
all right. So
Crazy.
let's we'll stick
Because
to
I
some
love
context
calling
real
us
quick.
monkeys
Gotta
as
read
humans.
There's a
It's the
very
craziest stuff.
we'll just get the context real quick. There's a very, very big Instagram model who wore the Timcast IRL shirt.
Yeah.
She got like almost 11. She got 10.6 million followers, and this is just like one of the coolest things ever. So I don't know if I should shout her out because I don't want to draw undue political attention, but she's a very, very big influencer. And she has two different posts. So she's wearing the I Am a Gorilla t-shirt, which is just meant to be a silly meme about, Alex Jones. It's not really political. It doesn't even reference Jones. It was just something from the show that we thought was funny that people seem to like. There should be no message conveyed other than I am a gorilla and a picture of a gorilla. So she wore that, and it was really, really awesome. So we were talking about it, but she did have one of the discolored ones. It's not the really awful. It's just kind of weird looking. And then you made a comment about the left. Whenever they see stuff like this, they immediately think of black people. And I was told this when we made the I Am a Gorilla shirt. I thought it was just a funny cartoon gorilla. And leftists actually said the shirt was racist just in and of itself being a gorilla. And I was like, now that's racist.
Yeah.
So your point was, if you want to elaborate.
It's like, no, I mean, there's not a real point to it. It's just, I kind of point out absurdities and things. And it's just, I don't know what kind of person you are if when you see a primate, you automatically think of black people. I think you need to seek help.
You gotta clean
Well,
your room,
like,
man.
listen. Like Robin DiAngelo says she's racist.
Yeah.
She's
So
honest.
I think a lot of people like us who are just like regular moderate liberal types, probably a lot of people listen to the show, regular moderate conservative types, don't think of black people when they see, cartoon gorillas or whatever. But it's no surprise then that these racists on the left, they do think it. They literally tell us they're racist.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
would we doubt their own words? You know what I mean?
I think, just saying black and white is super, if not necessarily racist, just ignorant, because our skins aren't black and white. Like you have like a brownish hue. I've got
Well,
a
they do that
pinkish
too,
hue.
though.
Like I'm not white. My skin is not. This
Well,
is
even-
white.
Well, even then, that in and of itself is just way too broad. I mean, people say, well, black people. I'm like, okay, are they Nigerian? Are they Trinidadian? Are they Jamaican? Where are they from? I lived with a couple of Alvin Ailey dancers in New York City, up in Harlem, and one of the girls was a Canadian immigrant with Jamaican ancestry. I called her a Jamaicanadian, but she had no accent. So, but here in America, they would call her an African American. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But I had an ex-girlfriend who is Nigerian, who was raised here, who could legitimately be called an African American. You know, that's why I never use that term. I just say Black American.
I worked with a guy who was an immigrant from Haiti, and he was here on a work visa, not even a citizen. And we were talking about the absurdities of like these forms they make us fill out in these jobs. And he got really mad. And he was like, they keep calling me African American. I'm from Haiti.
Yeah.
And like, it was serious because he was proud of his country and like it meant something to him. But they kept calling him, first of all, he wasn't from Africa and he wasn't from America.
Yeah.
But like that was stripped away for the sake of political correctness.
That's what they do.
I won't put white or Caucasian on forms. I'll put other because I'm not white and I'm not from the Caucasus.
Well, you're allowed to do that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Caucasus region, like
Crazy.
all from Georgia,
I'm from America.
Europe or
Like,
something.
I'm from Ohio.
All right. Let's let's get into the first story. Don't forget we got Sour Patch. Let's press
Oh
on the
yeah,
buttons.
I'm in the corner. I'm
One of
pushing
the-
the buttons. It's gonna be a great conversation.
Very long intro. But before we get started, go to timcast.com and become a
Yes.
member because we have we are building this massive library of exclusive members only content
Oh, I love it.
about a whole bunch of crazy things with a whole bunch of crazy awesome people. We got James O'Keefe, we got Sidney Powell, we got Blair White, we got Matt Brainerd, we had Ben Stewart in the last segment talking about alien civilizations, maybe already dead, and DMT as some kind of path towards another reality. If you're into that, all that kind of weird stuff. Otherwise, we got Jack Murphy saying progressives can't be alphas. Ooh. Immediately, I know many progressives are going to be like, I challenge that assertion, and you should listen to it because it's actually an interesting debate. I totally argued with Jack on that point because I disagree. Timcast.com, become a member. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Let's get to this first story. Let's get to the big news. Ladies and gentlemen, Star Tribune reports Derek Chauvin trial. Court adjourned for the day. Jury selection expected to begin Tuesday unless appeals court intervenes. They say motions were reviewed during a short 1-hour session in the afternoon. Case resumes Thursday. They say jury selection was delayed for at least a day in the murder case against Chauvin, charged with killing George Floyd. Hennepin County District Attorney Judge Peter Cahill said he wants to hear from the State Court of Appeals about the prosecution's desire to revive a third-degree murder charge to the counts of second-degree murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death last May, which was captured on a bystander's cell phone and broadcast around the world. Cahill, who threw out the disputed count last fall, said the prospective jurors home for the day ahead of bringing them back. He sent the progressive jurors home for the day ahead of bringing them back on Thursday. This is where we're at so far. And outside of this news about the delay, we also have, they've set up barricades already. 2,000 National Guard being called in. This is always the craziest thing. I'm like, when we're putting these videos together and trying to figure out what the right title should be. It's like, do we mention 2,000 National Guard called into Minneapolis because they're scared people are going to go crazy? Or do we just give you like the straight facts? And I was like, let's avoid the National Guard's coming to get you. But I think it's fair to say, no matter what happens, I think we'll see riots. I don't know what you think.
It's not going to end well. I mean, there was I wish I remembered his name, but there was a guy who wrote a piece on Medium way around the time that all this stuff was going on. And he mentioned, it's a part of the MPD's code. Like they're allowed to use the knee on the neck or something like that in terms of restraint. And I mean, his whole argument was that it's likely that Chauvin is not going to be convicted of first-degree murder. I just don't think these charges are going to stick. I think second-degree murder.
They're trying to add third.
So I mean, I don't know how these charges will stick, but it's also, I mean, this is a huge sticking point for me because it's yet another in this litany of stories that involve law enforcement and a black person being killed that are completely distorted by the press. And you take this string of incidents, or you create this string of incidents. You don't look at them on an individual basis. For me, the Eric Garner case, that was more of a gray area. But then you have like the Walter Scott case where he got shot in the back, and it's a clear-cut case of murder. I think that cop is actually serving 20 years in prison.
Was that the one where the guy was running away?
He was running away,
the cop
and the cop just pulled it, and bam, and shot him.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff. You're like, or I think the Philando Castile shooting was also a bad shoot. But the
NRA, that was the one where he legally owned a gun.
Oh, right.
And the cop panicked and shot him anyway. That made me angry because I was like, the NRA should have been out here in 2 seconds.
Right. Well, see, and here's the thing on top of that, because there are many channels on YouTube that upload nothing but police body cam and dash cam footage. So you can, I mean, I've seen a lot of people get shot, but you can see hours and hours of what police have to deal with all the time. And when you begin to see, for instance, how a routine traffic stop that can be friendly, pleasant, can turn deadly like that, or you see, the idea of sending social workers to handle, for instance, like the
Capital insurrection.
It's just because, when you see enough videos of like a 6'5", dude who's in some kind of psychosis or he's on drugs or something, and they try tasers, they don't work. They try beanbag rounds, they don't work. They try, people, they're emptying their magazines into this person and they still don't die. You know what I mean? It's just, there's so many more layers and there's so many more things that you have to consider that people just don't consider when dealing with the police. You know what I mean?
Take any one of these people to a firing range and then give them a handgun and watch them completely change their opinions on all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I recently was talking to some friends and explaining to them the first time I ever went to a shooting range, it was during the Ferguson riots. Mm-hmm. I've mentioned this, so fans of the show probably are familiar with the story. They said the first thing was, have you ever fired a gun before? If you haven't, we don't want you to go in there without someone to train you and give you the basics. And so I said I hadn't, but the guy I was with was like this hardcore war journalist who's fired full auto, AKs in the Philippines and other crazy countries. Mm-hmm. So he was like, don't worry, we'll teach him how to fire a Glock, no problem. And my aim was actually, no, my aim was awful, but I was consistent. I aimed for the chest and the target at 7 yards, and I hit him in the groin every time. But that's true story. I was very aware of how I was holding my body, and I could repeat that same position, but I was just shooting low every time. And they told me I was probably pulling my hand down when I was pulling the trigger, and they tried giving these pointers. What they told me was the average person that they give a handgun to can't hit the target at 7 yards. And believe it or not, the other people who were with us, they couldn't hit this thing. I was amazed by like how bad everyone's accuracy was. Now you imagine you're 20 yards away? Mm-hmm. The Mythbusters did this thing where they're like, a person with a knife can close 21 yards before the cop can get his gun out. So the average person in a panic situation, a cop, even with certification of some sort, it's a high intensity moment. He's freaking out. He's adrenaline rushing, and he goes for his gun, and the guy's already closed the gap. Yeah. And if the guy's further away than that, he's got to be pretty good, proficient with his weapon. People don't realize, man. There
was a reporter who did, who you can find this video on YouTube, who was very much, he was on that narrative of like, anti-police and all this stuff, and he went and underwent the training. And that exact scenario, someone, and there's videos online that you can find of people with a knife. And, they might be across the room or something like that. And the officer will get stabbed several times before his partner is able to draw and take the guy down. I'm like, but this reporter was like, oh, his mind totally changed because he saw just how dangerous somebody can be with a knife. I mean, there was that shooting recently. Was it in Philadelphia where the guy had the knife and people were like, he shouldn't have been shot. I'm like, dude, he was having some kind of mental, I don't know if the politically correct term is psychosis. Or episode. Let's go with that. And he had a knife. And when you've seen hours and hours of this stuff and you see how it turns out, it's one thing if you have an issue with police using lethal force. I could actually respect that position if you have an ethical problem with it. I'm just glad you're not a cop. But if you're trying to say, well, they should never ever under any circumstances use, I'm like, dude, sorry, man, that's just not how life works. It's not how life works. You are divorced from reality. I cannot ask, in good conscience, a cop to go out there knowing there are risks, and I don't mean all the time. It's not, I'm sure they can be on edge in many circumstances. It's not like every day they go out there, on the verge of dying, but it is a lottery ticket where if you get those numbers right, you get a bullet. And so I'm not going to ask someone to buy that ticket unless I give them the opportunity to protect themselves in the event the ticket comes due. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I see these cops who go out there, and I think we need police reform. I think we've got issues with police accountability. I've experienced this in Chicago. Always be better. Absolutely. And at the same time, we just had this video go viral where a woman, I guess the story was a woman asked these cops to come in and protect her as she was going into her home because she was worried about an ex who was armed. And so the cops are like, he has a weapon, let us know where the weapon is. And it seems like they're with her to protect this woman. Dude barges in the door and just starts shooting like crazy. This is a reality, man, when you have to deal with the violence and the anger. And so here's what ends up happening is
we're asking cops to enter the situation, but we're also asking them to essentially throw themselves in the sacrificial dagger in the event that something goes wrong. So you have, I think the George Floyd thing was a very, very tragic case with a whole lot of problems. And I do think that Chauvin bears some responsibility for this. That's why I said manslaughter may actually be an actual outcome. And the reason for it, he remained on the neck 3 minutes after Floyd was unresponsive. And so maybe you argue that the training says that's what you're supposed to do because it allows them to breathe. Maybe your argument is he should have sat him up and then rendered aid or something. The challenge is, so like I said, they might actually say manslaughter. Like, you could have done something. You were the one who restrained him, and the restraint was part of the reason for death. But you have many circumstances where, well, let me start by saying this. You have many circumstances where cops screw up. Philando Castile, legal gun owner in his car, telling the cop, I do have my legal gun, and the cop panics and shoots him anyway. That's messed up. But then you have, these circumstances where in that one viral video where these two cops are trying to subdue a guy, and then he runs to his door, grabs the gun, and just shoots both these cops like crazy. That's real life. These things happen.
I think, is that the video where the one cop just starts, he lets out this blood-curdling shriek, and then it's just silent after he gets, that's some chilling stuff.
It is.
But you have to be aware of that kind of thing and that kind of danger before you can really offer any sort of nuanced opinion on these kinds of matters.
And now think about it. So for all the things I've seen wrong, like you mentioned, was the Michael Scott case.
Yeah.
Walter Scott, sorry. Yeah. Michael Scott is from The Office.
Yes. Great actor.
Not him. No, sorry. Walter Scott was running away, and the cop just looks and then puts a bullet in his back. He went to prison for that. Yeah. He got held accountable. I'm glad to hear it. For all these other stories, you got to understand the nuance. And the way I usually put it is, I hear the left say, oh, the likelihood they get shot or whatever is slim to none. And I'm like, I hear you. So what you're saying is you think these guys should take a job that doesn't pay very well, has crappy hours, and every day is a lottery ticket where if their number comes due, they die? I'm sorry, man. I'm going to give them a weapon and say, in the event that happens, because we're asking you to do this on our behalf, you defend yourselves. And that means there's going to be there's going to be accidents. There's going to be bad people. And it means it's a part of life. We got to figure it out. When that dude shot, Walter Scott in the back, he got arrested and charged for it. He got held accountable, thankfully, because of video. So we need to make sure we're being reasonable. In the event with George Floyd, I think it's interesting. I think they overcharged the guy. Yeah. And I think the activists want retribution. I don't think justice is the right word for it.
The question is, was he defending himself? I agree with you, because their job is they need to defend themselves. But was Chauvin defending himself?
He wasn't.
It didn't seem like it.
No, and I definitely think the media and the left makes it out to be substantially worse than it was, especially after we saw the body camera footage. Floyd saying, take me out, put me on the ground, things like that. But I do think there is a legitimate question where we can have a debate about manslaughter, not murder. Mm-hmm, the murder charges, I think, are going to fall off because I think third-degree murder is that you intended to cause harm that resulted in death. But I don't think, look, so we can pull this up. We have this tweet from Brandon Stahl. You can actually see, this is from the MPD training manual, apparently. It shows the cops putting their knee on the neck of another officer. It's not a real, submission. This is a training video. YouTube, don't demonetize us. This is the police training material. You can see they're trained to do this. Yeah. And they're told to do it because they say, place the subject in the recovery position to alleviate positional asphyxia. The point of putting their knee on the neck is specifically to stop them from suffocating. The question is, George Floyd was put in the custody of these officers. When the officers assume custody of an individual, they have a responsibility now. They have a responsibility to make sure that they're not causing the person harm or creating undue stress and, checking on this individual. I will say, the reason it's a tough question is because it was a matter of, it was 9 minutes. To me, that's crazy. That's a long time to be kneeling on somebody, 9 minutes. But it was 3 minutes where Floyd was unresponsive. What should he have done and what was he doing and what are the real questions we're trying to ask? Ultimately, I'm not sure prison solves anything. Maybe he gets kicked off the force because they were like, we need people who aren't going to be, they're going to be more attuned to this. But prison time? I mean, I think that's bold.
Prison time, it might make some people feel better, but I mean, let's be real. No matter how this shakes out, which, I think we're all in agreement that it's not going to be what a lot of people wanted, the people seeking retribution want it to be. And,
I think they want first-degree murder.
But they're already primed now, because as soon as the lesser charges go through, they're going to say this is yet another instance of the racist system in America, being unjust toward Black Americans. And I'm trying to stave off this creeping nihilism, but there are a lot of instances where I feel like there's just, you can't. I guess I shouldn't say can't, but I just don't know how you walk back from all of this. This
Be
is
optimistic?
Well, this is what's funny, because I tend to be more pessimistic, but I also feel like, well, if you become demoralized and you become depressed, then whoever they is, they win.
Right.
But then I spend a lot of time down in Atlanta now, and at my job, which I won't mention because I don't want people to track me down and be crazy, but it's my job to enforce a dress code. Let's say that. And so the minute that somebody shows up and they're not in dress code and they happen to not be white, they immediately jump to, well, you're racist. Even though, and then they're like, what about that person? Oh, you mean that Black person wearing a blazer and dress shoes that is in dress code? Okay, if there are Black people inside, then how is it racist that you can't get inside? But that's where their mind jumps to immediately.
Right,
but this is.
Do they call you racist?
Yeah. Oh, Uncle Tom. They call me a house Negro, except they use the other N word. It's just the most. One of the guys I work with is South African. I'm like, how much blacker can you get than someone from Africa? And yet they call him the same kind of things when we're just enforcing these rules.
It's about power.
But it's deeper than that, though, because I think about the average life of a Black kid in America, and they wake up in the morning, they go to school, and what are their educators telling them? Oh, America is racist, Civil War, Abe Lincoln, MLK. Their favorite athletes, their favorite comedians, their favorite musicians, they all have this same sort of message. They go on social media, they watch the news, it's the same message. It's their relatives, their friends and family are all saying the same things to them. So this is a constant inundation of this worldview that says that white people are evil, America is racist, and this is generations and generations now. And again, in my darker moments, I say, how do you combat that? Someone like me comes along, and here's another irony of it, because when I was a kid, it was the other. People think that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. That is not true at all. But we grew up in around working class, sort of more on the poorer end of things, and because of the way I carry myself, the fact that I had the temerity to turn in my homework on time, or at least to try, I was accused of acting white. And now what's happening is that you have this educated class now, this intelligentsia, this bourgeois class or whatever of white, but also Black people who are also saying the same things about, if you're punctual, if you're disciplined, if you're a rugged individualist, then you're striving for whiteness. If you're looking for financial success or whatever, then you're striving for whiteness. So now you're getting it from the bottom and from the top as well. And so I don't know where you have to find some way to break out of that and escape from it. And I don't know what those avenues are for people.
Have you seen that thing from the Smithsonian?
Yes.
Before I even explain.
Yes.
But let's break it down for the audience.
Please, Tim, break it down.
Where it's like scheduling is whiteness and like being on time and working hard, saving for the future. I saw that and I thought to myself, for those who aren't familiar, like the Smithsonian had this chart where it was like a graphic explaining that, like I said, working hard is considered a trait of being white. I'm like, wow, white supremacists would completely agree. Huh. But what I thought when I saw this was, have they never been to like an African country? Like, people have jobs, people have schedules, people work hard, people save for the future. They're racists. They literally think that like these countries in Africa that function, that have employees and businesses, and that are predominantly Black, don't have schedules?
Yeah.
Don't save money in a bank?
Also, you have to imagine that whoever created that poster, I'm sure they had to meet a deadline at some point. They had to be able to compose their sentences properly and make their points.
Follow their schedules.
Their schedules. It's this. I had an argument with one of my Harlem roommates actually, and he actually was mad at me. I was talking about striving for financial success. He's like, man, that's just. He reacted, man, that's just another way of trying to be white, man. And I was like, there's a lot of Nigerian and Japanese businessmen, I think, who disagree with that notion. But how sinister is it? How insidious is it that these people who claim to be fighting on my behalf say that anything that you could possibly do to improve your life means that you are not really who you are. You know, it's and people can't see it because, I mean, that's the power of, I don't know, the leftist brand, the Democrat brand, whatever you want to say. But, you know, I mean, I left the Democratic Party 2 years ago because I began to say, you know what, these people they're not in my corner. They're telling me all these things that are going to lead to a terrible life and a life of dependency and insecurity. And yet they still want me to vote for the politicians that are pushing forward these same things, you know. And, you know, I shudder to think of how much money I could have right now if I just decided to say, you know what, everyone's racist and I'm a victim and
donate to my PayPal.
Exactly. Yeah. Give me a book deal, or Nike, please give me money. McDonald's, please give me money.
This is the funny thing about when they say like grifter and all that stuff. It's like, dude, you realize the corporations support the leftist narrative. If I wanted a big sponsorship from big brands who paid big bucks and I was really intending on grifting people, I'd just be a leftist.
Yeah.
That's like all of these major brands change all their logos to rainbows and you know, candy canes and all that stuff. And I'm sitting here. I'll be honest. It's not like this show is like far right conservative or anything like that. But
It's not?
No, sir.
Apparently not.
Apparently not. No.
Then what am I doing here?
Right down the middle.
I mean, that's the
Hitting
funny
the
thing too.
bullseye.
It's like the centrist doesn't exist to any of these people.
No.
It's funny. So like I have you know, some descriptions of me say Tim Pool has been variously described as left wing and right wing. It's like maybe it's because I'm a centrist. I think there are some things conservatives got right. I think they're the ones standing up for free speech for the most part right now. You definitely got conservatives who are pro cancel culture. They'll say they aren't, but they would want to cancel people if they had the chance.
Yeah.
For the time being, there are more moderates and conservatives who are saying, hey, don't ban speech. The left, the neoliberal left for the most part, is anti-speech. Shout out to Jacobin. I know a lot of people aren't fans of them, but for a leftist socialist publication, they've defended free speech for some really abhorrent people, saying they'll come for us the moment you let them go for them. So I can respect that. I don't care where you are on the spectrum. If we believe in freedom, individuality, you know, self-respect and all that stuff, or like responsibility, I think is just an easier way to put it. Mm-hmm. All of that's kind of going out the window these days. Like the whole idea is that I guess on the left, you are, it's a really horrible way to live. You are responsible. Let me put it this way. You have to do what the left wants you to do. And if you screw up, it's your fault. You get no benefits for being an individual. You have no right to work. They create villains to keep you in line. But the moment you make a mistake, then you are an individual. Then they do sacrifice you. Then they do come for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's, I was actually attended what they called a salon. This was in New York City. It was hosted by an actor friend of mine, a brilliant guy, excuse me. And he showed this video where this guy explicitly said, people tend to focus too much on the individual. We need to focus more on the collective. And I was like, well, yeah. I was very silent during that entire affair. People were like, what do you think, black guy? I'm like, I mean, this is one of those things where you had to walk in. They had these bracelets at the door and you had to put one bracelet on for each mark of privilege that you had. So, you know, if your parents went to college, wear a bracelet. If you are able to vote, wear this privilege bracelet. You know, if you have a mother and a father, it's just like there's this. I mean, it's a secular religion, man. There's all these like there's self-castigation. It's just it's so insane to me.
I took the privilege.
I can't see it.
I took the privilege test and I scored very, very poorly.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tim.
Very poorly. Yeah, so it's like it asks you a lot of questions. Are you religious? You know, are you white? Are you male? It's like, what's your gender? What's your race? What's your religion? What was your family's income level? And all of these things. Have you ever been a victim of this, a victim of that? And I'm going through it, and it was like, it's like you are very underprivileged or whatever. And I was like, I never knew that. I never knew that. Like, I guess I understood growing up we weren't rich, but it never mattered.
Also, what is the right amount of privilege? You notice nobody ever really dictate or quantifies what that is. You're overprivileged or you're underprivileged, but no, what is the perfect amount of privilege that we're allowed to have?
I don't know, because I know people.
You can't quantify it. That's the problem.
I know people that were born in pretty much the same situation as me, strong family, and part of like they looked like their surroundings, so like they had that familiarity bias. I don't even think it's a racial thing. I think it's like if you're familiar with your surroundings, you know, someone looks like me in a.
Brett Weinstein basically says this.
Yeah, but they're like losers. No offense to you guys if you can hear me out there and you know who you are, but they never made much of themselves. But they had that. They still had that privilege. And then I know people that I was a huge nerd. I mean, look at me. I was like pushed around in school. I would talk like this in school, and people would be like, get out of my,
Weirdo,
weirder
nerd.
things than that.
Yeah.
It was hard. But I had some privilege, but you have to strive to make something yourself, regardless of what kind of privilege. So the privilege is not gonna give you the success. You have to take that.
No, you know, I read something interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine, this guy I know, and he said that he was shocked. He said it's shocking that we don't teach Juneteenth in schools. And I said, bro, they taught me Juneteenth in school. I think the issue is your school didn't teach you Juneteenth. So I don't know where you went to school. In the city, yeah, we talked about it. I'm not going to pretend like the school celebrated or anything, but I remember like opening up the book and then reading about, this history. And I think the issue was like where he grew up in his community, perhaps his community didn't, like there's certain stories and certain things they didn't think were as relevant, so they ignore them. It's not like you're going to teach literally every child, every grade school kid about every bit of history. And I thought it was interesting that he said that, because I was like, first of all, it shows you that your experience is you think your experience is the world's experience. Mm-hmm. You think because they didn't teach you that I wasn't taught or other schools don't. That's just you, man.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because I don't know, you're familiar with Ryan Long, the comedian?
I know who he is, but I'm not.
He's got a new bit, and it's brilliant, where it's basically a therapist telling the woman, no matter what she does wrong, she should tell the world to change instead of her. So he's like, when she's like, I can't seem to find a good guy, he's like, have you considered writing an article telling men what they can do better? But it's a good point, because when I hear people say like, why aren't schools teaching this? I'm like, bro, they do. Not all of them, and not yours. So maybe there's an argument, but then why don't we teach the Holodomor? You know what I mean? Like, you choose what you think matters to you. You see the problem? I'm not here to disrespect anybody's struggles or plights. And I also don't know what history is more important based on privilege. Is the Holodomor ignored because it was white people? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. The Coalition of Communities of Color said that Slavic people are people of color now. So does that mean that we are ignoring a genocide of people of color in the Holodomor by not teaching this to grade school children? Or does it make sense because Juneteenth is literally an American, a holiday in 47 states, and it should be more prominent in this country? Well, these are just conversations.
Well, yeah, right. So, like I work backwards, right? So we were talking before we came on air. I'm binging a lot of Thomas Sowell right now, and he goes in on what he calls intellectuals, the intelligentsia, and how they and visions of the world. I think everyone should read A Conflict of Visions to sort of get a grasp on. It's Sowell's attempt to highlight the roots of the ideological fissures of our time. And he talks about the intelligentsia in terms of journalism and journalists, and how they tend to filter out facts that are inconvenient to their own vision. So, why don't we teach the Holodomor? Well, it's inconvenient to the leftist vision of the world, and
Juneteenth isn't, so they're bringing it up now.
And then talking about who, they're not teaching this in schools. I mean, I remember there was some tweet about people like to forget about Emmett Till. I'm like, who has not been told about Emmett Till? Everyone knows who Emmett Till is. I don't know who is not teaching that. But again, it's like,
Who is he?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
No, see, this is a good point though. Like,
wow. Well, so Emmett Till was this kid who basically he was accused of whistling at a white woman. This was back in the 50s, I want to say, and he got the crap beat out of him. You can find pictures online of his corpse. It's beaten beyond recognition. They beat him. They threw him in. They threw him in a body of water. I mean, it was awful. It was horrible. But every person I've met, except for Ian apparently, knows that story. And but this idea, like, we're not teaching this is wrong. And the last thing I want to say, just working back a little bit, is that June should be Black History Month. The one stereotype that I will accept about Black folks is that we do not like the cold. They gave us the shortest, coldest month to celebrate our history. Why is that?
Nice.
And
that's just ridiculous to me.
But even better, when you said June should be Black History Month, I'm like, that is the month of Juneteenth. Like,
exactly. It makes sense. I'm launching a campaign right now. No, I'm kidding.
Can you guys briefly, and forgive my ignorance, explain Juneteenth and the Holodomor? Can you explain those really quick?
Oh, God. Holodomor, basically, Stalin, lots of policies that led to starvation of millions of Ukrainians. The New York Times, famously under a journalist named Walter Duranty, who has an award named for him, and this guy later won a Pulitzer Prize, which the New York Times has not rescinded. Wow. He deliberately filtered out, as I said before, the information about the Holodomor. And meanwhile, there was another British journalist, and I wish I remembered his name, but he was actually reporting what was going on, and he got smeared and impoverished.
Long story short, Holodomor was a genocide of Ukrainians. The Soviet Union took all their food away from them, basically, and they all just started starving to death. It's brutal, horrific.
And Juneteenth, I've heard a lot about it, but I would love for some clarification.
Oh, I don't remember what it is. It's like the emancipation.
It's essentially the June 19th, the celebration of the day. I think I could be wrong. The day the Union marched in Texas and enforced the end of slavery officially. It was like the last person who was still enslaved got finally.
And there's a move to make it a national holiday.
So, interestingly, in more recent times, 47 states already have it as a holiday.
Oh.
And I got to be honest, I think we should absolutely, as a nation, celebrate Juneteenth. I really do.
It's a significant event.
It's Independence Day, man.
Yeah,
and I've heard the leftists talk about how it's like the day, we finally said this is the end of slavery. And I'm like, dude, absolutely. Like, it was it's a horrible thing. And I'm all about, more celebrations for America and the things we've done right. So the 4th of July, I'm down. You mean I get another one a month before to celebrate?
You know what I'm saying? Do you know how much barbecuing is going to happen?
Yes.
If we put Black History Month in June.
Yes.
All right.
Man, come on, man. Just make it happen. Kamala, make it happen.
That's
So,
right.
I'll tell you the issue I take with a lot of the critical race theory, a lot of the leftist approach to things is like I did an hour-long documentary on Ferguson and Pruitt-Igoe and public housing and the racial covenants of St. Louis, systemic racism, institutional racism. And when I sit down with conservatives and Trump supporters and actually have conversations as like human beings sitting down together to have discussions, we actually come to an understanding of each other's views and politics and understandings. And if there's something like Ian wasn't familiar with Juneteenth, I'm not going to pretend to be the expert. I probably got some of it wrong, but I'll just be like, oh, so it's basically this. So when I talk to conservatives, treating them as humans and good people who just, maybe don't understand, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Like, surprise, surprise, when you actually sit down with someone and have a conversation with them, they'll be like, oh. They may still be like, well, I disagree with these particular points. So the issue I take is we just basically said on this show, Juneteenth should be a national holiday. We should have tons of barbecuing. And the problem with a lot of the mainstream left is that they need the conflict. Like when you mentioned your roommate who said, you're just trying to like act white or whatever that was. It's like they've created the villain that those of us who are fighting for civil rights and have for a long time in social justice are trying to do away with this idea that people are villains based on race. We want to be like, no, people are villains because they're bad people with bad ideas and they want to hurt you. But there are good people of all different races. There are bad people of all different races. But I think the people who want power in politics, and sometimes it's Republicans. I think Republicans have a lot of faults, but Democrats absolutely love using race as a wedge to drive a push for power. And I'll give you a really good example. They complain the Republican Party is too white. It's a bunch of white men, they say. And then when the RNC had several prominent black conservatives,
of black people,
they insulted them
Yeah.
and called them all the awful racial slurs. And I'm like, so you asked them to do better? The Republicans were like, absolutely, you're right. And then you insulted the people who spoke? Like, dude, I can complain about Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and the weak Republicans. The phrase Republican leadership is an oxymoron. I think everybody who watches know I say this all the time. The Democrats are something else. I grew up in Chicago, and I feel it's probably one of the reasons why I have a bias very much so against Democrats. I think that should be obvious to anybody. So I grew up in a Democrat-run city. I was personally screwed over by Democrats as somebody who was, essentially a liberal living in the city. Republicans didn't affect me in any way. I watch Mitch McConnell, and what does he do? He goes, slow down there, Democrats, and then he obstructs things. I was talking to a Democrat friend, and she was just saying all he does is sit on things and stop things from happening. And I'm like, right, and the Democrats actually do stuff. They do stuff that's either bad for us, or they do or they don't do what we want to do, and they do bad things. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Like you get Joe Biden, $2,000 checks, everyone says, yes, fine, they agree, and then he doesn't do it, and he goes and bombs Syria instead. And again, I know, Donald Trump, missile strikes, drone strikes, all the bad stuff too. There's a lot to unpack, breaking down all of that stuff, but ultimately, I really do feel like the Democrats are worried if we actually had the conversation where it was like, oh, I don't really care about race or gender or any of that stuff. I think people are, should be treated respectfully and we should come together and fight for common causes, particularly class issues. Oh, that's bad news for them.
Well, I'm convinced that most of us in this country agree on a lot of things. There are some hot button issues like abortion, for instance, that are just really emotional, and people have very divergent views on that. But I think we agree on more things than we are led to believe. And I say all the time, get off of social media, don't stop watching the news, and just start talking to people, and you'll see just how, when I left New York City, the dystopian wasteland that it's now become. And I went to a city like Atlanta, and I was so heartened by just talking to people who are not in this progressive bubble, who they're connected to life in a way that people in New York City are just not, and they have concerns that New Yorkers just aren't really privy to. And going back to your point about Democrats, one of the reasons that motivated my deregistering from the party. As a black person, you're just expected to be a Democrat, but you can't honestly ignore the fact that you have all of these cities that have large black populations that are afflicted with blight, all kinds of disparities, between rich and poor, crime. And they're run by Democrats. In many instances, they've been run by Democrats for decades, and yet people still keep supporting them. So, and I got backlash on Twitter when I'm like, I'm not going to vote for Democrats just automatically. They're taking our vote for granted. They piss in your face and they're telling you it's raining. They do it all the time, and black people just eat it up. And I'm all about black empowerment. But for me, my empowerment is, not automatically subscribing to any one worldview or any party. It's like, you want to earn my vote, then earn my vote. Don't just assume that I'm going to go there, and you can just say things and be like, oh, white people, and I'm going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just go along with it. I'm just not that guy.
I'll tell you what I see a big part of the problem is, right? So you said everyone you've met knows about Emmett Till. Ian didn't. I was talking about my friend who said, I'm surprised people don't teach about Juneteenth, and I'm like, they taught us when we were in school.
Yeah. The irony.
What these people, these progressives and these leftists, and many of them, I get it, good-natured, righteous indignation.
Yeah.
The problems they're talking about are in Democrat-run cities, like you mentioned. So when you complain about police brutality, you're not talking about rural Idaho. You're talking about New York City. When you mention stop and frisk, New York City. When you talk about racially segregated neighborhoods like redlining, that was Chicago, the red line. It's the train line. It's called the red line. They called it redlining. These things were all happening in cities run by Democrats for like 100 years. Mm-hmm. So maybe you got issues. Look, I've been to conservative parts of the South, very racist places. Mm-hmm. I've been to a lot of them. People have their own worldviews based on where they live. And I think one of the issues is that these progressives live in cities, and then they treat the whole country like a city block in Manhattan.
And they do it with the media. Like the media gets into all the cities. It's even like culture, politics downstream from culture, fantastic concept.
They'll go to a bar in Manhattan and then attribute their experience to rural Idaho.
And then they'll make a commercial and show it on TV in rural Idaho and start messing with people. And it's so insidious.
Well, it's so... Having spent 15 years in New York, I mean, it's such an enveloping experience, and even I have to stop myself from I have to remind myself that this is just a really unique place to be, and not everywhere is like this, and not everywhere should be like this. And New Yorkers, they think they're smarter than everybody else, and they think that everywhere should be like New York. But then when you leave New York, people are like, man, I don't like New York because I don't care you're from New York. What,
right.
You Yankee, yada, yada, yada. Like they just don't care. Nobody thinks that New Yorkers are as cool as New Yorkers do.
Yeah. Were you in Manhattan?
Oh, yeah.
People in Manhattan were like, Brooklyn's not New York.
Well, but everyone in New York agrees Staten Island isn't New York, even people from Staten Island.
Well, but also there's this, I've spoken to people, brilliant people who, they say, for instance, I don't like those flyover country people. People who have grown up in the lap of affluence and privilege say, I don't like these. But I'm like, dude, as soon as you leave Manhattan, the rest of the state is pretty red.
Right.
You can go upstate, and you can see Trump signs. I mean, maybe even a Confederate flag or two, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, dude, you're even...
They're bubbles.
They're in their bubbles. You're crapping on your own people.
They're in bubbles, and the bubbles are actually getting smaller and smaller in physical space, but denser in population.
Yeah.
So you go outside New York, even a couple miles, it's red.
Yeah.
You start
Yeah.
seeing a bunch of Republicans and Trump supporters.
And I'll say, I'll say this too, just in terms of the COVID response. I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, I feel like I have a bit of a unique experience in terms of having lived in the city at the start of the pandemic. I was one of the people, I mean, I was sanitizing my mail and my groceries back in January and February, man. I was stocking up on food. I was telling my friends and family. I still have nitrile gloves left over from when I stocked up on supplies. Someone on Twitter was like, "So that means you robbed medical professionals of like much needed gear?" I was like, "Oh my God!" But then you go
That's what they were saying back then, man.
They were, but
don't wear masks. They said that's crazy.
Yeah, thanks, Surgeon General. But then when you go to a place like Atlanta, where it's way more relaxed, and then you come back to New York. I mean, New York right now. I mean, I'm in this chat group on Twitter, and it's a lot of lefties and liberals who are against the lockdown measures. And a lot of us are in New York. A lot of us met up in New York last time I was there. And if you live in New York City, you are inundated every moment of your life. Once you leave your apartment, your shoebox, with, there's arrows on the ground telling you where to walk. There's little circles telling you where to stand, inside and outside. There's advertisements everywhere telling you to wear your mask. There's train announcements. There's digital it's everywhere. Get your vaccine. Stay away from each other. Mask up. Don't wear it underneath your nose. It's constant. It's constant. Then you go to Atlanta, and I make this point on Twitter, like, you can go get a lap dance in Atlanta right now, and no one cares. I work at a nightclub down there. No one's wearing masks inside because they want to get out and party. And it's not that they don't care. It's just that, it's just a whole different vibe. Then you come to New York and everyone is like walking around outside with their masks on, and they're afraid, and they're not socializing. And it's a totally different world, but they don't know it because they're in this bubble in New York, and they watch the news all the time, and they don't know.
You look at in response to Texas opening up. You get Michael Moore and Keith Olbermann saying, "Take the vaccines away from Texas."
Everyone should die.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, dude, you realize just like a little bit less than half of Texas votes Democrat. It was very close between, was it Beto and Ted Cruz where they were running?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah.
It was pretty close. And so a bunch of even leftists and Democrats were like, guys, please, there are Democrats who live in Texas. You don't want any of them to die. And they were like, there was one tweet from this guy, and he was like, furthermore, Republicans shouldn't die either simply because they voted for a Republican. That's insane that these prominent progressives say this. But look at who these people are. Limousine liberal Keith Olbermann and Michael Moore. They live in the bosom of wealth in ultra liberal cities. I don't exactly know where they're living right now, but they're totally in this weird bubble surrounded by other weirdos who think this is popular opinion. And even regular, even media Democrats who have all of their biases, we always complain about them. We're like, dude, come on. We don't want Republicans to die from the virus.
Yeah.
We can complain about the governor and stuff, but Florida's been open the whole time. And I'm like, here, dude. I agree, man. I think it's just one of the problems is that you have personalities like this, like Olbermann, like Moore, who it's the definition of a grifter. You know what I mean? They love to point the fingers in my direction, and I'm like, dude, I'll just say whatever I feel like saying. Michael Moore trying to rile people up to the point where he actually says, take the vaccines away, or maybe they shouldn't have vaccines, and Keith Olbermann saying they shouldn't have vaccines. I'm like, not even leftists were saying that, because you actually have people on the left who have opinions. I disagree with some of their opinions. I agree with some of their opinions. And I think many of them genuinely believe what they believe. But I look at people like Olbermann or Moore when they say stuff like that. I'm like, they don't believe any of this. They're just saying what they think will rile up enough people to get a bunch of retweets, and it worked.
They're part of the quote unquote intelligentsia. And I also notice a trend among a lot of these people. I mean, I often say that Twitter is a place where you can get away with saying things that would get you punched in the face in real life. And a lot of these so-called radicals or whatever, there's a guy that I follow. I follow him explicitly because I disagree with him so vehemently. He's a socialist. I'm not gonna say what his name is, but he's tweeting the most overheated, hyperbolic, melodramatic rhetoric about we have to overthrow the capitalistic system, and every time there's a Black person holiday, he's like Malcolm X, and then you watch a video, and he's just the most. I don't know how to describe it, but he sounds like this, and I'm like, of course you sound like that, because when the revolution goes down, you ain't gonna be nowhere to be found. you like if he's gonna be one of those people who's gonna have a gun and be like, oh, I don't know what to do with this, and oh, people are punching people, like I don't know what to do. It's the softest people who have the most to talk. It's all every time.
I've been getting more. I became more of a gun person in the past year because of the riots.
Yes, you have. I'm finding bullets just randomly around the house. By the way, it's actually pretty hilarious.
Well, they're not. It's not random. It's not random.
Okay.
No, it is. It is strategic.
Let me out of
here.
But
I won't get into too much detail because security at the house and everything like that. But it isn't random. And I started going to the range. We mentioned this earlier in the show. Like, give someone a handgun who's never fired before. Man, will they not be able to make it work? And so the people there's a lot of new gun owners, a lot of liberals went out and bought guns. Mm-hmm. And I hope any of you listening who are new gun owners, you go take some classes. You go to a local range, you ask people to give you all the tips in the world, because you need to respect, what it means to be well-versed in the rules, the safety, how to actually shoot. When the revolution comes, a lot of these people who are, on the left, they're not going to know how to operate a gun at all.
No.
And so there's a joke where a lot of conservatives say this. They were like, I can't remember exactly what the joke is. I'm sure people listening will know it, but it's something like, thank you to all of the liberals who are buying supplies. You're collecting them for the people who own guns, which is like the conservatives. Because when it really comes down to it, what are you going to do, when people are getting violent? It's the craziest thing when I have these conversations with people and they don't think anything bad is happening, because we are truly frogs in a pot boiling. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of people saying like, Tim, you were scaremongering about Civil War or whatever. And I was like, yeah. And then like 800 people stormed into the U.S. Capitol building, I guess. So was I wrong? Like, I didn't say the apocalypse was going to happen and like we were going to see meteors fall from the sky and the whole planet was going to blow up. I said people are going to start escalating the violence and the tensions, and it's literally happening. And I don't see any reason why it would stop at this point, because they're still just ramping things up.
Kind of like a global civil war. This fifth, I was going to call it fifth generational war, but it doesn't have to be
world war.
One country. Yeah, but it's like a civil world war. Like it's an economic world war or a political world war right now.
It's a weird time of upheaval. You know what I mean? It's very, very, it's weird. It's unique. And I think that's the issue too, is too much. We have that saying, right? Those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. Well, there should be another saying where it's like, those who think the future will be based on the past 100% are fools. I don't know. It's not a good quote, but you get the idea, right? You can't look at 1860s and be like, that's going to happen today. It's like, what are you talking about? We have phones. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we have the internet. Like there's just...
artificial intelligence. This is like,
yeah, seriously, and
satellites
and nuclear bombs. It's not going to be the same conflict. Back in the day, I love talking about this because it's a point a lot of people don't realize. Could you imagine during the Civil War sending a message from D.C. to like Fort Sumter, and you're like, how do we get a message there? Put it on horseback, and then it'll be there in a week. Today, it's like, let me just text Jim. Mm-hmm. Yep, you got the message. All right, they're moving out. It's just like the instantaneous transmission of information has changed everything.
Totally.
So what we experience is going to be very, very different. It's not going to be, like the past.
Yeah, I don't know how things are going to work out. I mean, I am curious. What is his name? Michael Malice, who talks about all this chaos is actually good, because on the other side of it, we're going to come out better for it. And maybe he's right. I mean, maybe that's part of why people like me are popping up, because we're saying, more and more of us are saying like, no, this is not okay. I'm not okay with the way things are going. But at the same time, whatever happens in terms of getting to that place, whatever that proverbial better place might be. I mean, maybe that actually, now that I think about it, that might be another form of utopianism in a way. It's like, what's on the other side of that? It's no place.
You ever watch Star Trek?
No, I watched The Next Generation like back in the day.
Great show.
One of the best shows ever made. Yeah. One of my all-time favorite shows. And I'm just like, I look at this vision of the future where you've got people of all different race and species. They work together. Mm-hmm. There's alliances. And I'm just imagining like this 90s era liberalism that truly believed in treating people based on the content of their character resulted in this idea And it wasn't even 90s. I mean, you go back to the original Star Trek, and they had like the first interracial kiss with,
Right.
Uhura, I think.
Uhuru. Yeah.
Right.
Uhura.
Uhura.
Yeah.
Wrong one.
Sorry. Oh no. Oh. They're gonna come after me now. The Trekkies.
But so it was always fairly progressive, and then in the 90s, it brings about this vision of a future where people are all getting along and judging people on the content of their character. Could you imagine Star Trek today, where it's like an alien race comes in, they're like, how many arms do you have? Okay, you have no arm privilege, but you are psychic, or you have psychic privilege. And it's like a show based on that worldview would just be like the most painfully dystopian nightmare.
Yeah. Not
a good idea for a future. I like this idea where we're all just like, we're going to get on a spaceship and go to space. I don't care what you look like. Can you press the button? Great, let's do it. You know what I mean?
I feel like the previous show that you mentioned, however, even though nobody would watch it, I guarantee it would get at least a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I should
and
probably
be showered
film
with
that
awards.
Oh yeah, it would be like 1% audience rating, but like 100% certified fresh.
Exactly.
I think we should film a sketch like that, but not be explicit in the comedy of it. Like literally just make woke Star Trek as like a short, like 3-minute little bit, and just see if that happens.
Take it seriously.
Take it seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, be like the captain has to be like a disabled person of color who's non-binary. And, because a privilege is not going to be given to the white male or whatever. And then a certain species comes in and it's like a floating mass and it has no legs. It has no color. And so they're like, it has no known privilege,
That would be excellent. I think the captain should be, oh gosh, it should be a fat black transgendered paraplegic in a hijab. That should be the captain of this Star Trek series.
Well, I think, taking it seriously, all of the cultures and everything of the United States of this, not the United States, of the world coming together, and I think that's actually a legitimate depiction of a future captain. I think that's like the vision they have for it. Yeah. South Park did it as a bunch of olive-skinned bald people who went in the future people. Well, we gotta, we skipped over Cuomo basically, but it's fine because that conversation was better, in my opinion. We got to do this story though. We have to. From USA Today, Burger King UK under fire for tweeting. I can't read this quote. I'm gonna break the quote up so that no one claims it came from me. Women belong, and this is Burger King, in the kitchen, and that's what Burger King said. All right. Now I break it up that way because someone's going to try and pull it out of context and try and make it seem like I'm the one saying that. I do not believe women belong in the kitchen. I'm actually not. I'm a proponent of women succeeding in the workplace and getting beautiful salaries and running companies. More to the point, we can all be proud of the fact that the military-industrial complex is now run by women.
Yeah. Exactly.
Great strides in blowing up children.
Women are killers too, everyone.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic.
Hey, equality.
But to be serious, they can be. You look at how the prison system handles women, and they treat women they get less harsher penalties.
They get more lenient sentences than men.
Absolutely.
Do for the same crimes.
Women can be murderers and criminals and all that really awful stuff too. They can be warmongers and weapons manufacturers and all that stuff. And Burger King thought it would be a good idea to claim that they believed women, belong in the kitchen. So USA Today writes, Burger King's attempt to highlight gender disparity in the restaurant industry with a provocative tweet appears to have backfired. On Monday, which is also on International Women's Day, Burger King tweeted this out.
Yep.
I can't believe it. A bunch of like nationalists and like pro-Western personalities are saying like, thank you, Burger King, for saying what needs to be said. This is exactly what women need to understand. And it's like, oh, geez. And the left is saying, apparently Burger King is defending themselves. They're like, it was a good tweet that is bringing attention to the issue that only 20% of culinary professionals are women. And then the left is just like, so why did you have to tweet this sentence, which is not in any way conveying the message you think it is?
If it had been me, I would have said that I just would have called myself Burger Queen for a day, and then maybe that would have been okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Burger Queen.
Just call it Burger Queen.
Yeah,
Just Burger Queen for a day.
That's a good idea. They should hire you for marketing.
I don't think they should. But I saw it and I was like, this is hilarious. And of course, my first thought was, we got to keep it family friendly. It's so difficult for me, but it's just this idea that it's like, well, I guess they could be in the kitchen if they truly want to be. What if they're choosing to be in the kitchen? Of course, when I let them out of the basement.
That's right.
Women have been
Tina.
fighting for thousands of years to get out of the kitchen and fight the patriarchy. With a single tweet, Burger King is trying to put them back in the kitchen.
I know. How dare they?
No, but it's even funny too. Like, so what Burger King is basically saying is that culinary professionals tend to be men, and I'm like, even to that regard, like, is it possibly because we have socialized to the point where we're telling women not to take these jobs and to be professionals and go and work for bigger corporations? Like, we have been screaming to our children, particularly young girls, be the CEO, be the high-powered attorney, be the executive. And so, I mean, these things have consequences. So now we're 20 years later, and you have a bunch of women who are going to school specifically for jobs that will make them a lot of money and give them a lot of power in corporations, not culinary arts. I think for a lot of people working as a chef in like the culinary industry, it's very much about a passion for cooking and baking and creating food. And when you take these kids and you tell them you won't be respected, you won't make money, don't do it, what happens? You get a bunch of people who are like, I'm going to do what I have fun doing and what I enjoy doing. You have the stigma, for the most part, for young women being told you have to do more because you won't have respect unless you take these jobs. Men aren't hearing that, so they're like, I love cooking, I'm going to go cook.
Well, it's the strangest phenomenon, and I'm at an age now where I see a lot of new mothers, and I become disturbed on their behalf because they actually feel guilty that they want to spend more time with their children. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't the whole point of all of this is to provide you with options so that if you choose to, you can stay home? And I think this also speaks to something deeper, and it's sort of related to COVID in a way, like the instinct that so many people seem to have to want to stay indoors and stay away from just living their lives. This devaluation of life. I mean, my thing is, yeah, it's great if you have all these degrees and all these accomplishments, but I mean, every new father I've met has said, yeah, I got to keep working. I wish I could stay home and be with my kids. They understand the sacrifice that they're making, but I don't find as many women who understand that sort of cost benefit now. I wonder if it's because they've been told all their lives that they need to succeed. And I'm thinking to myself, well, we've known, you can't take it with you. You can't take all your degrees and all your money with you, but your children do live on after you. Yeah. I was doing these Shakespeare sonnets, and a lot of them have to do with just fertility and carrying on your legacy and your lineage. And they're very wise. They're these 14-line poems, and within each of them, he's addressing somebody. And at least in this first chunk of them, he's talking about well, you're young now, but you're not always going to be young. And one of the best ones, he says, well, when you are old, if you have children, then your own youth and the joyous time that you had in your youth will be reflected back to you, and that youth will live in your own youth will live forever through the youth of your children.
They actually call passing your wealth down to your child succession, and that's success. I mean, the word success comes when you succeed. You're sending all of your things to the next generation.
But even then, it's like, even if we're just talking about material wealth, I mean, what other kinds of wealth are there? There's what your philosophical wealth, your emotional wealth. Your ideas, your philosophies on life. I mean, these are also things that you can pass down to your children that you can't earn in a workplace or at a university.
What blows my mind is we hear about this trope where people are on their deathbed and they say, a person on their deathbed never wishes they spent more time at the office. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The one thing we always hear is they wish they spent more time with their family and their friends and their loved ones. There's a story I was reading on Reddit a long time ago. It's about a guy who said that I think it was his grandmother showing him photos of him and his, of his uncles and his aunts or whatever at the Grand Canyon or something. And it was just a picture of the Grand Canyon. That was it. And the grandma looked at it and she was like, this is when, I was with your aunt and uncle at the Grand Canyon. And then she paused and said, why did I take a picture of the Grand Canyon? I don't care about the Grand Canyon. I care about your uncle and your aunt or whatever. And then he was like, that was the guy wrote the story. He was saying that was like a profound moment for me where from now on, whenever I do anything, the photos are always of the people I'm with, not the things we've done or the places we've been to. That's peripheral. That's the outside. The memories we have are the people we love and care about. So I'll tell you what really freaks me out, what I'm worried about, when we constantly tell women that they should be career women, that they're there's a feeling some women have of social stigma. I'm not saying all women. I'm not saying it's something that every woman experiences. But I've seen the conversations from women who are concerned that if they want to be just a homemaker, they'll be in some ways socially inconvenienced or face a detriment. Like they could get divorced, and then how do they take care of themselves? They won't have respect from their peers. The issue I see is that men don't have the same biological limitation on having kids.
Yep.
You could be a 50-year-old man and have kids. But women do have that limitation. There are ways to mitigate that with like freezing eggs and things like that, but that is something men don't experience. So I look at these stories and I'm wondering if like the reason why, perhaps, I don't know, I'm not saying it's true. It's something to consider if people want to make sure they're happy. If maybe the reason why many women aren't in the culinary arts is because they're being driven towards certain professions, men won't be negatively impacted. They can trounce about, waste time, travel Europe, and just do whatever they want because they can choose to have a family at any point.
Yeah.
And there are very different realities for women. Call it the patriarchy, call it whatever you want, but there are certain privileges to being a man in terms of how much time you have to figure things out.
One of I have so much compassion because I feel like women have a lot of big decisions to make about how they want their lives to be. And they have a limited window in which to make those decisions. And they also need to make those decisions at a time where they don't really have the wisdom. You know what I mean? None of us have the wisdom when we're 22.
Or the wealth.
Yeah.
You could be a 50-year-old guy and have a bunch of money in savings. Like, now I can afford a kid.
Yeah.
I was thinking regarding restaurant work and men and women that, in my experience, they would stuff men in the kitchen and women on the front in the counter because women were beautiful and made people want to buy more, and men could handle the heat and the grease and the steam, and it's physically toxic basically. So it might be a kind of job that men's bodies are just because like it's like working in the iron mine, like you put the men in the iron mine.
Well, that's the patriarchy.
But it's also biological in a way. I don't know too much about it.
I'm sorry, Ian, are you implying that there are differences between men and women?
Brett Weinstein, yes. Yes,
Just
genetically,
cite Brett.
yes.
Let's get Brett in trouble whenever we have a
Yeah.
Sorry, Brett, I love you.
Well, he's a smart fella, so but I would defer to him because it's like, if the experts are saying things, but no, I think you're right. It is biological. Why is it that the service industry tends to be female? You go to a restaurant, the serving staff, it's not always, not absolute. There's a ton of guys who are waiters, but you'll tend to see women taking service jobs because men will tip more probably, or at least is the assumption they do.
So again, at my job, I see this play out every single night. You have these men that show up of any age, really. A lot of them are older, and they're throwing all this money around, and I don't judge because I see how the game is played. We have all of these young servers. They're in their early to mid 20s, and they're beautiful, and they each have their guys come in and they have these men wrapped around their fingers. Each of these men come in saying like, "Yeah, I'm here to see Tatiana or whatever," and they think that that they are special to her for some reason. Now these guys, they're kind of scumbags, so they're going off and they're doing whatever they want with other women too. But
right.
But just what you were talking about, they're making so much money, and using whatever their wiles are. And also a lot of these guys come in, they show up. Now, I don't know if they're paying for this company or if they're actually winning this company, but these guys with money show up with women that are half their age, and it's the kind of thing that you read about and you're like, that doesn't really happen that often, but then you see it unfold, and it's kind of weird, but it's like, I guess I kind of get it. That's just sort of how the game is played, but it's not something that people like to talk about because it's not politically correct. I'm like, well, there's nothing about the interaction between the sexes that is politically correct.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember what I was watching, but it was like some movie where there was an old guy who hired a lady of the night, as it were. And he didn't want to hook up with her. He just like hung out with her and talked about his day and his life. And it was basically like the plot line was
My autobiography.
he was like 60 years old. He didn't have any friends, and he liked, he felt he got good feelings being in the company of a young woman who he could talk about himself and have someone listen to him. And I'm like, for these guys, you call them scumbags, probably, but I don't really see anything all that nefarious or wrong when they show up to this club wanting the attention of these young women and tipping them and giving them money or whatever. You can argue it's transactional or whatever, but they're getting what they want out of it. They're getting emotionally satisfied.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything illegal. The women are getting resources for providing that level of like emotional comfort to these guys. I mean, so I'm like, hey, man.
And these girls, I mean, look, we have to walk them to their cars at night because, like I said, not the best kind of people that show up at these places sometimes. But they're driving nice cars. They live in nice apartments. I'm like, look. Do what you can while you got it, and make your money. I hope you're studying something else, but again, that's how the game is played, and people want to shy away from that. But
see, this is where the conversation ignites a whole bunch of the gender ideologues. They get really angry because, like we were talking about, women can only have kids for a certain amount of time. They could freeze their eggs, but there still are, even with freezing eggs, there still are implications for having kids at an older age. Yep. And so what happens is we end up, for a variety of reasons, with the institution of marriage. And, I hear a lot from conservatives. They say that women should
be in the kitchen,
get married young. I hear a lot from conservatives. They say women should get married young. And the reason conservatives say this is that as women age, they become less valuable, I suppose. So that's the idea.
It's a tough word to use, but yeah.
Well, that's like, look, you look at OkCupid.
Well, if you're talking about the sexual marketplace.
Right.
The biology of
I'm trying to be very, very precise with my language here.
Yeah, we're. I think we all are at this point.
We've talked about it with Jack. OkCupid put out a data set showing that men just message 22-year-olds.
Yeah. You
can think it's bad. You can think it's wrong. I personally don't agree. I don't have that preference for being a 50-year-old man. I would not want to be, in a relationship with someone that young. Would prefer someone closer to my age. But that's what the data shows, and you can't make all men change. Like the Ryan Long sketch, Have you considered writing an article about what men can do better?
Yeah.
Well, like it's not gonna do anything for you. You know what I mean? So this is why I think a lot of people would argue that marriage came about this way because it provided security for the woman.
Right.
So they have access to that man who will provide for them, and it's assuming the woman wants these things. They're by all means, women can do whatever they want. I just think that's one of the reasons it likely came about.
Well, it's funny because then I encounter women oftentimes, and and again, I mean it's a byproduct of just being a curious person, and when you talk to people and just non-judgmentally and you ask them questions, and just over the years I've heard a lot of women say like, you know what, I'm ready to just not go to work anymore and just be kept. And not have to worry about paying bills and da-da-da-da. They would never say that out in public, because they would get shrieked at by their friends. But, I do think that maybe more women than not kind of feel that way. There's actually I have to read this paper, but it's called the paradox of declining female happiness. Whereas I guess you could say their rights and freedoms have expanded over the past few decades. Since the 1970s, they've been self-reporting ever-increasing levels of unhappiness.
Right.
I think I read somewhere else that about a quarter of women are on some kind of either antidepressant or psych medication or something like that. And and again, I talk to people, and there's all these stresses and all these things, and they're inundated with this news about how everything's wrong and everything's oppressed and everything. So
I don't think it's you mentioned like freedoms that women have attained, and then we see this inverse. I don't think that's the correlation. I do think you can say women's rights have expanded, women's access has expanded, but I think social pressures have come along with it.
Right. And responsibilities on top of that.
So, the way I see it is the higher levels of unhappiness, and, honestly, you could probably pull up the scientific studies and figure out, what the cause of that is. I think freedom contributes to happiness. I think rights contribute to happiness, but then I think social stress and anxiety contribute more so to unhappiness. So I don't know if I wonder if you could look at social pressures and social media and find that it affects men and women fairly equally in different ways. Like you look at young women in Instagram, and you have these Instagram models that are all touched up with Photoshop and everything, and it's resulting in anxiety, stress, and depression. It's social issues that are causing it. maybe you could argue that if you took away someone's freedom and they didn't have access to these platforms, then they wouldn't be unhappy with them. But I don't think that makes sense. I think it's just like, burning down the house because you had a plumbing problem in the kitchen. You know what I mean? I think by all means, keep the house, fix the plumbing, find out what the problem is. I think the problem is with unhappiness in general, be it males or females, is social media. It's creating this pressure to conform to certain things, to say certain things. And then it results in, like we mentioned before, with people like, Keith Olbermann saying insane things about taking vaccines away from people in Texas because you don't like their opinions. It results in people advocating for beating others and committing acts of violence because they're increasingly more and more desperate to fit in. We talk a lot about how young women are influenced by Instagram. There was apparently cosmetic surgery based on Snapchat filters or something like this because they want to clean their really creepy stuff. Young women who will post a photo on Instagram and then not get enough likes and get really depressed and start freaking out. It's really negatively impacting these kids. But then how is it affecting men? Because I'm sure it absolutely does.
Well, as you were speaking, I was thinking, and I relate this to myself, especially as a I guess a former actor. I don't know anymore, but I follow The Rock, for instance, and I love the guy. I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, or at least I was back when it was good. And I think in terms of men, and again, this might lead into sexual dynamics and where people perceive their value to lie, maybe within the sexual marketplace, maybe not. But if we're talking about women using filters and beautifying themselves on these platforms and not feeling beautiful enough in comparison to other women, what about these other accounts where you see these men who are out, I'm starting a business and I have this amount of money, I got
flashing wads of cash.
Exactly. I got this car, I got this house, I got this and that. So I think a lot of guys are looking at that and they're being like, well, that's not me. I mean, I guess I'm just a freaking loser, man. I don't know. I don't got nothing. And then, and I got all these women are commenting on these posts. And so maybe, that's part of it. Maybe that's contributing to male unhappiness. It's the success status, the status comparison is what I'm getting at.
Guys not having kids, guys not having relationships, staying home and playing video games all day, not advancing. I think I don't want to just kind of shift this and dump it all into social media, but I really do think social media
it's a huge issue,
is affecting both men and women.
It's really the education around it too. Like you said, it's not the freedom that's destroying them, it's their misuse of it. Because you have the freedom to light your body on fire, but not to. And if you knew that it wasn't the filters that made you beautiful, that would help.
Some people, look, you got a freedom not to eat a whole ice cream cake from Baskin Robbins, but some people will do it. You know what I mean?
And I was also thinking, when I would post a video on something of me being like, oh, I feel like crap, 2 tweets, 2 retweets, 2 likes, and then less people would want to follow me. I post a picture of me on a boat with a bunch of beautiful women. Everybody wants to be my friend.
Take a look at this. What you were saying about these guys. Casey Neistat. You familiar with Casey?
Yeah.
He's like the godfather of vlogging on YouTube. Look at his biggest videos with 50 million views. What is it? I'm in a luxury first class $20,000 airplane ticket, mini hotel in a plane. It's a lot of his biggest stuff was flaunting extreme wealth and status. And I'm not saying it to disparage him in any way. I'm not saying he did it on purpose. I'm saying, he did a video vlog where he was flying on a Emirates flight. It's like a $20,000 ticket. And they give you a room, and apparently there's a shower in it or something. It's really crazy.
Wow.
I don't know if that was his video, but his video was he has this little room he's in. And it gets 50 million views because people want to see that status. It's why we had shows like Lifestyle, The Rich and Famous, and Cribs. So very much so, as we've entered this space where you now control your own media outlet, everybody's a public figure. For some reason, and by all means, the feminists can tell me why this is happening. Women have started to focus specifically around beautification, getting likes for their appearance and their bodies. Maybe it's a bad thing and they shouldn't do it. By all means, feminists can tell me, comment below and say they shouldn't. I'm not asserting my opinion. I'm just saying it's happening.
Well, there's also, it's the question of power. And, and again, I go back to, my job. And it's kind of funny. There's a comedian named Patrice O'Neill who unfortunately passed away many years ago from complications of diabetes. But, he talks about how he said, I wish I could just walk around for one day as a beautiful woman, because he talks about how, they could be the plainest person and just have nothing going on for them, but if they look good, they can walk around as if they're celebrities. And so again, I'm at this job and I see it every day. There is so much, and and it's strange. I mean, the same thing. I try to watch my words because I know that I will also get heat from gender activists and feminists. But to deny the power, the raw power of a beautiful woman and the effect that it has on a man. I mean, and even other women say like, oh, she's so pretty. You know, what do you do? There is something about that. I don't even know if I can put it into words or articulate it, but it definitely has an effect. You can be, you know, I mean, I don't consider myself somebody who, I guess by the nature of my profession, I'm used to being around beautiful women, so it's demystified for me, and in a way, it's made me even more choosy as far as who I choose to date, because I'm like, okay, well, I see all of that, but you know, what's inside, what's going on up here, what's going on in here. But I just even I sometimes it's like, so hey, hey, hi,
Too powerful.
It's just
Feminine wiles,
you know, and honestly, it doesn't even have to be. She doesn't even have to be super duper attractive. She could just have a certain way about her. That's what we kind of say, you know. And it can completely disarm you, and you don't know what. I mean, Antony and Cleopatra, the Shakespeare play. That's sort of what it's about. You see this powerful man, this general, this warrior, and Cleopatra is at home, and she has him wrapped around her finger. It's amazing.
Do you have any like male heroes or people you look up to, like you're a big fan of?
I have a few.
Do you ever meet them?
Well, a lot of them are dead, but
there you go.
but one right now that that I like a lot is actually Malcolm X, and which I think might surprise a lot of people given my viewpoints. I mean, I'm sure people who follow him would call me an Uncle Tom and all those other things. But the thing about it, in his autobiography, in the epilogue or the afterword to it, the actor Ossie Davis, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he made the point that Malcolm taught us how to be a man when we were not allowed to be men. And there's this clip that of this press conference that he gave after his journey to Mecca, and he was asked about bringing the case of racial discrimination and oppression of Black Americans to the United Nations. And Malcolm said, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, you know, I would not be a man if I did not, you know, pursue this action. And he repeated, if I didn't bring this case against up to the UN, I would not be a man. And so for me, you know, even though the concept of maleness is consistently derided now, I think there is a true power in being able to say, this is what I'm standing for, this is what I believe in, and I'm willing to put my life on the line to say this. And you know, it's one of the things that inspires me to keep on running my mouth right now. Is like, you know, if I don't say something about this, then I would not be a man, whatever that means,
or a human,
before we go too far,
yeah.
The reason I asked is, you know, you're talking about how you meet this woman and you get tongue-tied, and I started thinking about this a while ago. You know, when they talk about what the average male or female finds attractive, it's like guys want young, beautiful women, and there's a variety of physical features that men are attracted to. The Cupid data showed that it's like 22-year-old women almost exclusively. Like, no matter how old the guy gets, he always goes for 22-year-olds. And then I thought, okay, well, they say, like, what do they say about what makes women, you know, attracted to a man? Confidence, charisma, and status. And I'm like, so you mentioned that like a woman could have nothing going on for her, but just be beautiful, and then guys are like fawning all over,
yeah.
And I was like, so then what's the male equivalent of this high societal value? And it's status, notoriety, and fame. And I'm like, so then I wonder if there are similarities between, you know, guys who look at women and are like, woo, and guys who look at a celebrity or a famous individual and yell at them, not sexual advances, obviously, which definitely gives guys a bit of that privilege, because, you know, I'm sure a lot of it's disgusting. But when you're a guy walking on the street and you have a bunch of people like hollering at you and yelling at you like, yo, can I get a picture? I'm a big fan. It's not identical, but there's a similarity there in this is what society values in men. This is what society values in women. Interestingly enough, though, women will still get it worse when they're famous and beautiful, because now everybody's yelling at you because you're famous and they're yelling at you because you're beautiful. So it's an interesting dynamic. And the reason I asked about male heroes is I was wondering, do you think you would get tongue-tied if you came across a male, you know, hero of yours who you looked up to and was inspired by?
I think so, probably.
So I want that's just an idea I was wondering about. You know,
there's actually in the film Malcolm X. I mean, Denzel Washington. He was so unbelievable in this role. Like to this day, when I see a picture of the real Malcolm, I see both men. And there's a scene where in the film where Malcolm meets Elijah Muhammad, and Denzel plays it so beautifully. he has his head down, and you see tears start streaming down his face. This is a man who spent his time in prison educating himself, learning how to speak. This dude was a former pimp. You know, he goes into detail in his autobiography, about how he learned the street slang. You know, and so he knows how to talk to people. And yet, in this, at least as depicted in this movie, he meets his idol. And he can't say anything. He just starts crying. It's such a powerful, beautiful moment. And I will say I did get to meet Harry Belafonte, and that is somebody that I said, I wonder if what I would say to him if I ever met him. And I did a show off Broadway where he played it was a play called Carmen Jones, and he did the movie adaptation of it, and he played a character named Joe, which is what I played off Broadway. And one night he came to the show, and I've been saying to myself, well, what would I say to him if he showed up? And I'm somebody who is extraordinarily grateful to the people that came before me, which is another reason why I step away from this woke stuff, because I feel like they keep erasing the heroes of the past. But I got out of the theater, walked around the corner, and there he is, this 91-year-old man in this wheelchair, eyes still bright, these bright blue eyes, his great cheekbones. And at a certain point, I just said, "Thank you for everything that you have done. You're a warrior and you're a trailblazer." And I just want to shake your hand. And I was like, "Can I get a hug?" And he got up. His old 91-year-old rickety self. Man, I get emotional thinking about it. And there's video of it. And we hugged each other. And so that's one instance where I said, I just was like, that I met a trailblazer and the hero. Where I was like, thank you. So maybe. So maybe say what?
Not tongue-tied.
But I guess what I'm getting at is that maybe it depends on who the guy is and what situation that he's in his life. Like I see other guys at the gym or whatever, and they look good, they're ripped or whatever, and I'm like, wow, good for that guy. That guy looks amazing. Or I'll see somebody who's like doing their thing, they're running a business, they make money. I'm like, wow, good for that guy. Like I could be there somewhere. But at the same time, the flip side might be, man. We're keeping the family friendly, so I can't say what I want to say. But man, look at this dude, you flashing all this, man. You got these big muscle, man. Whatever. You just, we call them haters.
Yeah.
To be.
I got a lot of them on Twitter.
Oh, I bet you do, my friend.
I remember I was working. I worked in California once when I was doing fundraising, and I saw a dude pull up in a very expensive car, like convertible, and I'm just thinking like he looked really young, like early 20s, and I'm like, what is he doing? And I was like, hey man. And he's like, yo, what up? I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're making all this money. You clearly look like you're doing well. He's real estate. And so it's like, I saw that, and I went up to a guy, and I was like, yo, I want to talk to you real quick. Because I saw his power and his status. You know what I mean? And I was like, give me some advice. Like, he was a little bit older than me. And I was like, what is this? How do you afford this? What do you do for a living? What's the key? How did you get started? Tell me those secrets. You know what I mean?
That's the plot of The Pursuit of Happiness. Remember that Will Smith movie?
Yeah.
Where he
but that was based on a true story, wasn't it?
Yeah. But he sees a guy driving a nice car, and he's like, well, what do you do? Like, well, I'm a stockbroker. He's like, well, I want to learn how to do that. How do I learn how to do that? So I mean, that's the kind of thing. I was speaking about this earlier to one of your colleagues, just about this creeping nihilism, this lack of aspiration. There's no people. It's as if, and especially with the response to COVID, people are just content with sitting in and just shutting themselves in all day and never striving for anything. And in wanting to strive for something, it makes you greedy, it makes you selfish. You're only thinking of yourself. But how, if you're constantly denigrating people who want to build something or to achieve something, maybe they are selfish. But if that drives them to create, if that drives an Elon Musk to launch rockets into space, you know what I mean? Then what's the deal? What's the problem with that? Why can't we aspire to be like these people instead of tearing them down? It seems like there's a huge cultural movement where it's like striving for any kind of achievement or whatever is looked down upon.
Crabs in a barrel, man.
Crabs and
like
yeah.
Crabs in a
resentment, like if
Trying to
you're
pull you
not,
back down.
if someone's not striving and then they see someone that is, there might be this resentment. Maybe is
Well,
the
do you-
reason.
Do you know the phrase "crabs in a barrel"? Crabs in a bucket.
Yeah, what is it? They snap at each other because
When-
they all want out at the same
Right.
time.
So when one is climbing out, the other one grabs, trying to pull itself up.
If
Pulls
they
them back
only
down.
knew if they worked together, they could all get out. The bottom guy would climb up their backs first,
Pull
and then
them all
one
out
at a
in one big-
time.
Yep.
Except
But
the guy at the top would have to hang there and carry the weight of all the other crabs.
we need one of those crabs to like introduce crab communism so they understand the power of the collective.
You know
Just
what
say,
you
like
could
this
do?
collective, yes.
Get a bunch of crabs to cling onto the barrel in a circle, and then a bunch of crabs out, so you have like a funnel of crabs, and that way
All right, all right.
distribute the
Yeah,
weight.
yeah.
Let's work
and-
together.
and
to
all-
We've solved
decentralize the weight
It's
distribution.
it's the age-old mathematical problem. We've now solved it. The crabs in a barrel mathematical equation. It's simple.
There it is. And all the crabs that disagree, kill them.
Then we eat them.
There we go.
Some butter sauce.
Perfect. Everyone wins in this scenario.
All right, let's go to Super Chats. If you haven't already, go to timcast.com, become a member, because we got exclusive members-only segments that will be coming up, of course. And smash that like button, subscribe to the notification bell. It all really, really helps, so seriously, smash that like button. Normally, I like to start from the beginning, but I'm looking down at this one Super Chat, that's more recent. I have to read it. Ashley Underwood says, Clifton, I'm going to listen to whatever you got to say just to hear you. That voice, wow. It's got the same something as James Earl Jones. It's a good one. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Your training has paid off.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Is it you did Broadway acting, you've done like vocal.
You know what? It's actually crazy. When people hear me speak, and I'm that rare breed of individual. I'm the straight guy who does musical theater, and so when they hear me speak, they're like, "Oh, clearly you're going on the bass or the baritone line." But I have a range where I can sing not crazy high, but much higher than you might think. So I just have a really weird voice. But I will say that the more comfortable that I get in myself. That sounds kind of weird, but the more comfortable that I am with myself and the more that I mature, the more that I relax into myself. I mean, I actually have to monitor myself and how I speak because I tend to speak very, very, very quickly. But it's actually sort of an internal kind of a thing, Ashley, where I
Oh, just you wait. There's more.
but
That's a lot more.
but just it's owning more of my maleness. That's really how I feel.
Masculinity.
That's how I feel about it. And for the longest time, I was so focused on appeasing other people and pleasing other people. And part of that was speaking in a tone of voice where, I'm trying to be friendly and it goes up here, but that's not where my natural voice is. When I'm more relaxed, this is where I tend to live. I just get really excited really, really easily. And part of it is training. Everyone can benefit, I think, from learning breath techniques and learning where to speak from and learning where their resonators all are. And it actually, if I can, kind of go off for like a couple of minutes, as an actor, it's kind of fun because then you learn where your different resonators are, where you can place things. So if I'm going down here and playing someone who is from in Africa, for instance, I can make Zamunda.
Because that movie just came out.
I know. I'm not hearing great things about it, unfortunately.
Aw.
Or I can come up here and play a completely different character and resonate more of here. Or man, I can come back here and be just real chill, bro. You know what I'm saying?
You did a Jordan Peterson earlier. That I was like, oh
Yes,
wow.
so
Yeah,
good.
it's seriously not good. It's not good.
That's great.
These radical Marxists. Yeah. Now I'm on the spot. It's not quite as good as it was, but
Yeah, no, it was really good before the show because you were just kind of
Yeah.
winging it as a joke.
yeah, I know.
I was like, whoa, that one hit the.
Yeah, well, I'll work on that, and
What was your
I'll get
history
better at
like from like young adulthood to professional career? How did you traverse that?
My life makes no sense, my friend. I was my mom was in the Army. I'm a military brat. So maybe, every 3 to 4 years my life was uprooted. I was born in Heidelberg, Germany. Maybe that's why today, I guess I like people. I'm not, I had friends who were Turkish and Greek and Dutch and all kinds of things. But there was nobody in my family who had any sort of artistic, or at least expressed artistic inclinations. And, I was going to be an illustrator. That was my thing. I dabbled in music and like in poetry and prose and stuff like that. And then at a certain point, I basically left. I was in his French class for 3 years. I didn't drop out, but I left to chase a girl basically into a drama class. And I just found I was good at it, and I got a lot of encouragement. And in-state tuition was way cheaper to go to theater school and get a useless bachelor's degree in theater. And I just sort of started going from there. I never really would have chosen to be an actor. It's going to sound a little pretentious and cliche, but it kind of chose me, and I just have sort of rolled with it. It took me a long time to be comfortable with it, and so I don't know the answer to that. I'm just kind of a weirdo who liked art and games and wrestling and video games and comics, and then now I'm
Chased a girl into theater school, man.
chased a girl into
what I
theater
did
school.
too.
Let me read some more of these super chats
Oh
for you.
Lord, where are we going
So
now?
I jumped to the beginning. I'm thinking this one super chat I'm reading is like just a funny one in the middle and it's unique. So I go to the beginning of the super chats, and Errant Thought says, "Good Lord, you should do voiceover work. Pure honey." M. Sheba says, "I'm not gay, but that voice is sexy."
You might be a little gay.
Spin facts.
All right. Stray Alien says, "The culture is better at Hungry Jack's," referencing Burger King.
Uh-huh.
All right, let's see. Petty says, "I've heard you and others refer to the third-degree charge as manslaughter, but the Minnesota definition is different and requires malice and disregard for life. Dude has no chance at a fair trial anywhere, though." Well, they're trying to... So it's second-degree murder and manslaughter, I believe, in the second degree for Chauvin. And they're trying to add third-degree murder.
This is what I'm wondering. How is he going to get a fair trial? How can there be a jury that hasn't heard of this, isn't predisposed?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Butters Oregano says, "Love when guests have a great voice and excellent enunciation. Side note, GME to the moon. GameStop hit like $200.
Oh, wow.
Are you serious? Wow.
Jeez, man. People are becoming millionaires overnight from memes on the stock.
I kind of love it.
Yeah.
Especially considering, it's GameStop, which people don't really like GameStop all that much. But so there is a part of me that's glad that it's achieved some kind of relevance again.
There you go. Yeah. Shooter CSW says, "Look into the history of International Women's Day. It's literally a communist holiday." Is that true? I did not hear that. Here's another one. Just Jenny says, "My God, his voice is beautiful." How much money did we make simply because of your voice? All of these people super chatting.
Just give me a cut, man. That's all I ask for. 10%. 10%.
Tyrannus Signa says, "Hello all. Clifton, what roles did you play while doing Shakespeare?"
My favorite was Macduff, and who's the hero of the play Macbeth. He's the one that kills the titular character. Macduff is interesting because, when you're interpreting these roles, you want to look at why is this character in the play? What is his function in this story? And how is he different from Macbeth? Macbeth turns into this evil tyrant and dictator, sort of like Andrew Cuomo. And Macduff, on the other hand, you see these scenes. There's only one scene, unfortunately, with his wife and his kid, and he has his, and whereas Macbeth is talking, about power and darkness and everything, Macduff has all this text where he's talking about, he's referencing God, and he loves his family, and one of the central scenes in the play is where he learns Macbeth has had his wife and children killed, and it's such a brilliant scene that's often cut because it's usually played pretty badly. But Macduff is a great one. Caliban is another one from The Tempest, one of Shakespeare's later plays. And that was interesting. I did that in Washington, D.C., and Caliban is explicitly referred to as a slave. He is a slave. So right away when I was cast, I knew, oh, man, we're going to have to deal with a bunch of backlash. And, but even though there's a lot of language in the play where he's like, he's a moon calf, he's a monster, this and that, I said, I'm going to treat him as a human being, because if I treat him as some kind of alien, and you'll see productions of The Tempest where some terrible director is like, we're going to make Caliban an alien and put spikes on him and da-da-da-da-da-da, but it's alienating for the audience, and they can't really visit, the humanity of this character, who I felt like this is a human being who's being treated this way, and what the audience receives is, wow, this poor put upon slave, and they begin to empathize with him. So I don't want to go on and on about it. That's a great one.
Did you hear that apparently there's going to be like a reboot of Superman? And I don't know exactly what it is, but they were talking about casting a black man as Superman. And I don't know if I've heard a lot of people say, there's a couple arguments. One of the arguments I've actually agreed with is that I think it's really dumb that they do hand-me-down characters.
Exactly, it's hand-me-down franchise. It's you.
Right.
You can't create anything original. We're going to give you this thing. Now, I have to be careful and measure what I say. J.J. Abrams is producing it, and people knock JJ, but I will say he co-produced the Broadway show that I did. I found him to be very smart and a very hard worker. And when I hurt my back, he actually sent me some cookies with a nice note on the stationery. I was like, yeah, sorry about your back. And a cool guy. But I mean, I agree. It's one thing if you're doing, an alternate Earths kind of a thing. And maybe there is a story that could be told about, about someone coming from an alien planet who is a minority and has to find some way to connect with this race of people around him. That could be interesting in terms of a Superman story. But if it's going to be Superman,
right?
Then that's a different sort of thing.
I learned anyone can play any role. Boy can play a girl can play a boy. Colors doesn't matter as long as it's good. Like if they make the stupid story about like, oh, I'm suffering because of the color of my skin, that's not Superman, man. Superman's a hero.
Well, here's the thing. So there's a practice called colorblind or non-traditional casting. It's very prevalent in the theater and also in the opera. And there's often this argument of saying, well, why can't it work in reverse? There's a playwright named Neil LaBute who wrote an article, an op-ed in the LA Times back in 2007 where he said, well, why couldn't Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie do A Raisin in the Sun? And the reason for that is, and why it often doesn't work in reverse, is that there are so many works by black writers wherein being black is a central part of the given circumstances of the play. So with A Raisin in the Sun, for instance, there's a scene where this white individual comes into this, and for people who don't know the story, it's basically about a black family in Chicago in the 1950s who comes into money and they want to move to a nice neighborhood that's all white. And so this representative of the neighborhood they want to move into comes in and offers to pay them money not to move. It's racism.
Blockbusting?
Say,
or redlining? Or?
No, I forget the specific. It's been a long time since I've read it, but it's basically like, we want, everything to be friendly and people to be happy where they are. And and a good director will cast a white actor who's very friendly and very, inviting to do that. But the point is the play doesn't work.
Right,
if you have white people playing the younger family, it's the name, the Youngers.
But I also think, it is weird, like Superman is an alien, but he looks like just like a regular English-speaking white dude. You know what I mean? And so even with Starfire, who's another DC character, she's orange at least. Yeah. And so I got to be honest, the idea of taking an existing character who is already defined and then just kind of handing it down, I think is disrespectful, and I think it's a cop-out. Instead of writing right. Make new original heroes with awesome stories.
Dude, you could play Superman. That'd be awesome.
But I'd rather play Captain America personally.
That'd be bad.
But so look, I like Miles Morales as Spider-Man. It's an alternate Earth version because there is the Spider-Verse, and I think Into the Spider-Verse was an awesome movie. I got no problem with that. If they just rebooted Spider-Man and were like, we're just gonna now celebrate the diversity by casting this character, I'm like, for 50 years or however long we've had these heroes, longer, like 70 years or whatever, when did Superman get written? There has been he's been a representation for a certain he's been a representation of a certain individual. I don't think you're actually doing anything for diversity or social justice by now saying, okay, now that we're done with it after 7 decades, we're gonna cast it in a minority position or something.
We need a new hero universe, like desperately.
No, just write stuff. It's like, where's the originality? Just make a new story.
It's not even that hard.
Well, also my fear about that is, excuse me. There is in the entertainment industry, there is a constant denigration of the audience. They feel like they're smarter than the audience, and but even if the audience, whoever comes to see your show, even if they can't articulate certain things that they don't like, they can feel it. And my fear is that if we keep doing things like this, and then when people push back against it, they say, like, Thor is a great example. Thor is a character that I never thought that I would enjoy that much, but when I read the comics, I was like, he's a wonderful character. And but when they said we're going to make Thor a woman, and they said, well, Thor is just a title. No, it's not.
Right.
He's the son of Odin, and he's the king of Asgard. And if you keep just but if you, no matter how, there was a great post on Reddit that said it. No matter how much you break it down, like, no, Thor is not a title. Thor is this person, and but they'll still call you a misogynist or whatever. And so if you say, like, I'm not really feeling a black Superman, they're going to call you a racist. And so I'm afraid that when someone like me comes along, they're going to say, I'm not going to see that. It's just some black guy. I'm tired of seeing all these black people. And, what are they there for?
This is interesting. You mentioned that one play about the black couple and the white guy. What was it called?
Raisin in the Sun.
Raisin in the Sun.
Right.
You said the play doesn't work because it's literally about a black family and, this thing was happening. And I feel there's a similar argument to Thor, right? Thor is literally the son of Odin. He's what is he? He's a Nordic
god.
Norse god. So it's like to change those attributes about him and then take his name also creates a really weird kind of story break in that it's literally about this god who is son of Odin based on this certain mythology. Some characters, it probably doesn't matter.
When you do colorblind casting, you suspend your disbelief, so a woman will be playing the male role, but it will be a man character in the play, just played by a woman. So the audience suspends their disbelief, accepts that it's a man, doesn't matter who's playing the role. But when it comes to skin color, that could be viscerally confusing.
I think
when they change it to a Thor as a woman now and not a woman playing a male role, that can be confusing.
If the story has changed. No, I think like what you were saying is, if the element of the story is the character is, of this race or this background, changing that just changes the story. It would be like really weird if like Brad and Angelina were being racially discriminated against as like a wealthy white Hollywood couple. You know what I mean?
Like, and actually my alma mater, my grad school, they did a production that caused a lot of controversy where you had, these white student actors who were playing these black characters. And it's just
wow.
It doesn't work. The play does not make any sense at all.
But as a statement, the play being the art itself, as opposed to the actual performance, I think is an interesting point to be made about why it doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Like, because then you show people and be like, it's kind of weird, right?
But well, that's a whole other discussion about like how is it benefit? I mean, I guess it could benefit if you're a student actor and you are exploring, maybe cultures unfamiliar to yourself. Then there's merit in that. But on a professional level, no one's gonna go see that show.
All right, let's read some more of these super chats. Maddie says, "My dad is Algerian. My cousins going to school here were confused by forms because they weren't black, but didn't view themselves as white. Maybe we should start trolling and put African American because technically we are from Africa." Did you hear about the kid? There was a scholarship for African Americans, and a white blonde hair, blue eyed kid showed up. And when they were like, "What are you doing here?" He says, "It's for African Americans, right?" And they're like, "Yes." And he was like, "I'm from South Africa and now I'm an American." And they were like, "Get out." But like for somebody who's not from here, they're like, "Oh, hey, I'm from Africa and now I'm an American." You know what I mean? They don't realize it was a racial thing. I think he did it as a troll, though, to be completely honest.
Yeah, but I mean, I've actually worked with like white people from South Africa, and it's the same. That's why I don't use the term African American. Yeah. It's just it's too broad and it doesn't really. Oh Lord, Tim, what are you reading right now?
Britain colonized.
I gotta read this super chat. I don't want to interrupt you though.
Okay.
No, I'm done. Let's hear it.
Matthew Hammond says, "Would Clifton go on Zuby's show? It would be two amazing voices that could read a phone book and be engaging."
You know what, man?
Too good.
No, but I really like Zuby a lot. We follow each other on Twitter, and he just seems like a decent guy. And I see all the hate that he gets on Twitter. I'm like, dude, he's what do you
genius.
do?
There's just so many where they're like, this voice. Clifton's voice.
Oh
Jeez.
man, wait till the radio show comes out.
I'm going to talk like this for the rest of the podcast.
Talk like this. Thanks for
That's what I'll do. There we go.
That's more you.
I'll just work like this.
Sounds delicious.
And everyone can send your super chats to Timcast IRL.
That's the voice they were hoping for when they donated. That soothing, high-pitched, screeching whine.
Doesn't it make you just want to take a nap?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Curl up with your honey at home and just.
Got me.
All right, let's see. Hartford House says Frederick Douglass birth and death month is February, Black History Month. Was that why they did it?
Oh, I'm not sure about the origin. My complaint is it's really more superficial, but it's just so freaking cold, bro. Like, just put it in a warm month. Black people do not like cold weather. We just don't.
Coldest month.
It's the shortest, coldest month. We don't like cold weather, man. Just put it in June. Put it in June.
And
I understand.
It is the shortest month too.
Yeah,
but you only get 28 days, 29 every 4 years. So be happy with that.
You.
Jeez.
So Acme Products says, the collectivization of the farms in the USSR led to rapid food shortages. Stalin decided to steal Ukrainian grain to feed the cities of Russia and starve out the Ukrainian nationalist movement. It's estimated 3 to 5 million died.
I got the name of that
nightmare,
British
dude.
journalist, Gareth Jones. Is that right?
No,
He was a Welsh journalist.
It was a different guy.
Oh,
and
interesting.
it's so disrespectful to him. But I feel Malcolm Muggeridge.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what his
right.
name
I think
is.
that's right. I'm familiar with this name.
Andrew Turek says, "Hey Tim, thanks for another great show. Would you ever consider having Colian Noir on the show? I think he's one of the best two-way advocates on YouTube, and I'd love to hear y'all talk. I would love to have Colian on the show, and
Yeah.
it's just COVID has made things very, very difficult for a lot of people, and so we probably have a list of like 50 amazing people who are like, dude, we'd love to come on, and we can't travel. A lot of them are in Canada, basically like every Canadian guest." Except for those who have like somehow made it out of Canada before the lockdown.
Escaped.
So they're all like, we're trapped here. We'd love to come on the show when they release us.
Wow,
It's Canada's brutal, man.
man, I can't.
Famous quote. Saikia Dargan says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that quote.
We have a second. Someone says, I second, Christina says, I second the suggestion to have Colian Noir on the show. That would be awesome. I'd love to have him. JB says, would you be ever willing to bring a nobody onto your show from Middle America to get our perspective?
That's me.
Yes.
Just kidding.
What we were planning, we talked about this a lot. We were like, we want to do a regular Joe's kind of thing, where we have like regular, union member or something who can be like, I'm in a union.
We
Here's
should get
what
our
it's like.
dads on and talk about firemen.
Oh, that'd be
Well, so
fun.
the challenge though is COVID traveling. And I think maybe like the original idea was we were going to travel around before, like the original idea for this channel was to travel around the country and do like setting up tables in random towns and talking to regular people. So like in real life. And then COVID happened and we couldn't travel. So maybe there's something still there with doing that once things get better. So we actually are building a mobile tour setup. And the plan right now is very preliminary, but we're going to travel to a couple different cities, spend a week in a city, and then do a Friday night live venue podcast.
That's cool.
Where the super chats are the audience. And the super chats, like we'll do both. That's the plan, which means a lot of work has to be done. And depending on what the lockdowns are like in various cities. But I think for the most part, like we stay in like Texas and Florida and stuff. We'd be totally fine.
Also, just quickly, one of the things that I love about the modern era, in platforms like YouTube is that, I mean, this idea of the ordinary person or the common man or woman, I feel like is sort of going by the wayside because everyone is passionate about something. And I use this example all the time, but there's a guy on YouTube who like trains dogs and minks to catch rats, and that's like his thing. And he has millions and millions of views on these videos. And I'm thinking to myself, or you think about how some of the most astute political commentary in 2016 was coming from an ex-Satanist who's sitting in his bathrobe
Drinking
in his
coffee.
room in Vermont. And so,
Sticks.
so this idea of the ordinary person now, I feel like, is sort of going out of the window because there's something extraordinary, I think, in a lot of people. It's just, you just have to find whatever that thing is that they like. And I love that I have access to that now. I can watch these people and say, oh yeah, and learn from them and grow in a weird way.
Deccan says, Tim, quote, people have their own worldviews based on where they live. Also, Tim, quote, conservative parts of the South, very racist. You don't live in the South and don't know our ways. Your outside perspective. Well, if I didn't say this properly, what I believe I said was I have been to conservative parts of the South that are very racist. I have spent time there. I have lived there. I did not say all of the South was racist. I did not say that every conservative is racist. There are places I've been to in big cities where they believe a whole bunch of far left crazy stuff, and I think the world represents their views. And I have been to places in parts of the South that are very, very racist. And to be fair, these people don't think the cities represent their views. They just have their own worldview based on where they live. But it doesn't mean every single southern state or whatever is racist or every person is. Mr. Kirk says, hello, big fan of original Trek, and there were many interracial kisses on the show outside Trek before the supposed first interracial kiss, e.g. kisses between white men and Asian women on Adventures in Paradise and I Spy. Interesting. Did not know that.
Well, but Asians, they're not considered a minority anymore, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, no, I'm double white.
All right.
Yeah.
You're white squared.
White square. Yeah, exactly. You know what, man, dude, I've heard some of the most insane racist stuff from these people.
Dude, it's so...
I was told by a guy at UW in Seattle that white supremacists love Asians and want to make Hapa children, just like how Germany and Japan was allied in World War II. And I'm just like, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard, where you mashed this like random idea from history and you know nothing about the war and like the interactions between any of these countries.
Right. Well, you know what? But my ex-girlfriend was Japanese American, and her and I have another friend of mine who's also Asian. They both said about themselves, this was unprompted, but they said, well, I just always saw myself as white, and I was like, that's really fascinating to me because
Like full Japanese?
yeah, well, like, I mean, she was Americanized, but but I was like, wow, I don't really have that option. How does that work for you? You know what I mean? So maybe I don't know how much of that.
Maybe she
mindset
grew
is
up in like a
prevalent.
white neighborhood, maybe, and she just found herself as part of an American culture and associated that as whiteness or something.
I don't know, man. I mean, she's a California girl, and I mean, she has a huge family that she seems very in touch with her culture. So I don't know where that ideology came from.
I didn't, I actually got a lot of flack from the alt-right. They said Tim Pool has no identity and doesn't understand identitarianism because, being mixed race, he can't truly understand what it means to have like a cultural history or something like that. And I'm like, I do. I have two different ones. I don't know. Just like someone could be French and Swedish. Well, then you have French history and Swedish history. But growing up, I guess, I grew up in an area where it was like fairly diverse. That was it. There were people of different backgrounds. So there was no identifying as white. There was no like thinking you are white. It was literally just like, I don't know. We didn't have an identity. It's like, one kid was Italian, one kid was a Polish immigrant, one kid was Asian, one kid was Mexican, one kid was black, and we were just like, we're Americans, I guess. We're skater kids. Like it didn't occur to us. And that really breaks my heart when I see what the modern identitarian left does. Because I'm like, wow, I really had that like perfect McKid, diverse childhood of all these different backgrounds and cultures and languages. And we all got along and had fun, and we're just kids growing up.
Nobody cared.
Right.
You would go over to your buddy's house, you'd play Nintendo or whatever for forever. Then you get bored and you go outside and you play some more. And just nobody cared about it. Nobody cared.
Where'd you grow up?
Germany, Virginia, Belgium, and Virginia. So I spent a lot of formative years in Virginia, on military bases, and you just hung, I'm in Belgium, from age 8 to 12, and like I said before, I mean, I had friends from Holland, I had friends who were French, who were Flemish, Turkish, Greece, Greek, all kinds of stuff, and you just no one ever cared about it. No one ever cared.
Awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
Julie Simone. Oh, she's got some fire for you.
Okay.
This likely won't get read given it was ignored during the show, but Clifton, you completely stereotyped sexual orientation in musical theater. Are black stereotypes fair game then too?
I mean, it was a joke, obviously, what I was saying. I mean, the straight man in musical theater. I mean, but we are a very rare breed, and I will say it's ironic because I do run into people often who say, we need more masculine men in theater, and but they're not writing roles for those kinds of people. So, but there's not one theater person who would not laugh at what I said because they understand it, and it's I mean, every musical I've done, I've shared dressing rooms with, where I'm the only straight guy in there, and no one really cares.
So think about this. Is
I can
interesting.
attest. I'm also a musical theater, theater major.
Oh, yeah?
Were you in Grease the musical? I played Vince Fontaine. It was
No,
nice.
I wasn't in Greece, but I did. Bye Bye Birdie was my first musical.
Oh, great musical! I can completely empathize and sympathize with what you're talking about.
Yeah, man. And in a weird way, it's kind of alienating because I'm alienating because I'm like, well, I don't really feel like I belong. But then I'm like, I can't say anything because then what are they? I feel like they're going to say back to me, well, welcome to the club, buddy. So I'm like, all right, cool.
Well, think about it, right? This is a joke that you're saying the people and the communities you've been in would laugh because it's a joke that resonates with you as people who are in musical theater.
As someone who actually does music, yeah.
People who are outside that would get mad. Not everybody, but there are people who are outside that, so will be like, you can't say that. That's offensive. And it's like, you don't understand the joke because you're not a part of the community where everyone would find it funny.
I don't know. It was like the least offensive community I'd ever been in, the theater. I don't know about you.
What do you mean?
When I was in it, people were so accepting of who we were. It wasn't really about
it's
gender, sex, or anything.
It's such a weird thing because it's an industry where within 2 weeks of meeting complete strangers, you're like making out with them.
Yeah, getting undressed backstage.
Yeah,
with them.
yeah, you're doing all kinds of things where where you're breaking down these mirrors. And even as a young kid, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I also knew that I wouldn't belong in an office anywhere. And and I'm kind of a weirdo, and I'm just like, here's a profession with a bunch of other weirdos, and we can all just be weird together and enjoy ourselves.
Highly recommend if you're going to go to college for an art degree. At least for me, I'm still in debt from it. I don't care. It was the most socializing, incredible experience. I met so many cool people. Like you don't need the degree, but it's the experience for me. You went to college for it too,
I went
right?
to college, then I went to grad school as well.
For theater?
Yeah, well, for acting.
Yes.
I want to read
BFA. Or
BFA
MFA?
and MFA. It's in my Twitter bio. I list my credentials because everyone's doing that now.
There you go. All right, we got a couple more. This is interesting. D. Montoya says Calvin Ellis was an alternate universe Superman who was black, and Raziphone says Val Zod is the name of the black Superman from Earth 2. The character was great, not because he was black, but because Val Zod was well written. Well, there you go. And then Greg says, how do you feel about a black female being cast as Anne Boleyn, considering it's a historical white person?
It's just, it's needlessly inflammatory. It's anti-historical. Again, I mean, I haven't seen this project. I know what this person is referring to. But it's one of those things where I don't feel like it really accomplishes anything. I don't know what they're aiming at. I mean, it's one thing if you have a show like Hamilton, which I think a lot of conservative people don't really get. And it's like, well, why are all these black people playing George Washington and Hamilton and Jefferson and all these people? But for me, it's a wonderful theatrical device where they're telling a story via hip hop that's really important. And I think it's fun for most audiences to come and see it because you're telling a history, although many historians have had problems with issues with the script. But I feel like that's such a different kind of theatrical event versus if you're trying to produce something that's got historical verisimilitude, then that's not the right way to go about it. And it just seems like it is signaling for this particular time. And I know you got to, but what I also am upset about is that, when you have these actors who are just trying to build careers, they're just trying to do something that they love and that they enjoy, and they're thrust into these roles. They don't deserve the sort of heat that they get, the criticism that they get, because actors don't give themselves these jobs, generally speaking.
I want to clarify a lot of what we were talking about earlier, because I'm thinking a lot about this. If I don't really care all that much about Superman being having a black guy play Superman. I honestly don't really care that much, so long as the character is written as Superman character and it follows this like storyline that stays true to the character. I don't really think it matters who the actor is, and I think the issue with hand-me-down characters is more so when, like, in the comics they made Thor a woman. It's like, couldn't you just make Valkyrie or something, like make a new hero for women that is more representative, instead of just being like, oh yeah, I don't know. Instead of making strong original characters like the big three in the Marvel universe, you can just have the ones we're done with. It's been a couple decades and the sales are down. Congratulations. It'll there you go. It's like, we'll just make a new cool character. Real quick too, there already are a ton of really amazing female characters across these superhero universes that already exist, and superheroes who are black or Asian. And I just I'll put it this way. I want to separate these ideas. When it comes to acting, I honestly don't care if Anne Boleyn is being played by a black woman. I really, really don't. It's a fictionalized theatrical version of it, and I honestly just don't care.
You got to be good. Make the best actor. Do the best actor. That's the point.
Well, yeah. But if they're striving for historical accuracy, then it does not work. If they're trying to do something,
make you cry.
Well, I don't know about that. Just if what they're setting out to do has nothing to do with historical accuracy, then that's a different thing. And then maybe I can entertain that. But part of the problem is like, going off of what you're saying, I feel like that would be fine if we were not in the times that we're living in right now, and we didn't have generations of this culturally ingrained idea of racism. And I feel like there's no way to do it now to race swap a character like that without it seeming as though you're trying to make some kind of a statement. And I think when people see that, they're going to be turned off by that kind of a thing.
If we have a lot of people pointing, I'm going to read the super chat because there's a lot of people saying the same thing. Ryan Pennington says, first super chat, thank you for everything. The problem with this new Superman is that it's being written by Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yes.
So I'm not super familiar with the work of Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Ta-Nehisi Coates is what many on the, I guess, in the anti-woke and the right-leaning crowd would call a race hustler. His views are very, and again, I used to share these kinds of views. his views are very typical of the left regarding race, about the America being oppressive, America being very racist, and he actually wrote a run on Captain America and Black Panther. I don't know how the sales are doing of those, but for me, when it was announced that he was writing Captain America, I'm saying, well, how can you have this person who seems to hate everything, or at least misunderstand everything America stands for, writing Steve Rogers? It doesn't work. So when you have Coates writing a character that stands for truth, justice, and the American way, maybe truth, maybe justice, he might have views on that, but the American way, I don't know if I think the issue is people might feel like he doesn't quite have the idealism or the sort of patriotic attitude that might help, that would make a Superman story more authentic. That said, I'm not super familiar with the Superman ethos and the character. People might have other views on that, but for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's the idea of like this seems like someone whose ideology doesn't really match up with the character he's been given to write.
One of the movies I bring up periodically is Spiral, I think it was called, and I don't know if you heard me talk about it or if you've seen the movie. Mm. It's a horror movie from Shudder, which is like a subscription horror movie service. And the issue I had with it is, the movie starts and it is an interracial gay couple who has a daughter, and I'm like that. I'm unfazed by this. I'm like, okay, cool. Like let's watch. I'm interested. I see a loving family with a kid, and I think that's fine. It doesn't really it doesn't stand out all that much. The problem arises when the story's plot is literally driven by the fact that they're an interracial gay couple. Mm-hmm. Instead of just having a horror story where a demon comes to possess the daughter and the family's fighting to protect her, and I can just generally relate to that, it becomes very specifically about a bunch of immortal white people who want to kill marginalized people. And I'm like, now you're beating me over the head with it. And I'm like, it's kind of like a weird, very angsty and angry. And so I think the issue is, we have all these movies where supposedly, or actually, coming off of what you were saying about how, if the story is like a black family with and the housing issue, it makes sense that the family is black. It doesn't work if they're white. Mm-hmm. You have this movie where it doesn't have to matter that it's an interracial gay couple with a kid. You have a bunch of movies where it's a white family and there are ghosts, and it doesn't matter if it was a white family or a black family. The horror story works regardless of the race and ethnicity of the character. Why can't we just have these things? You know what I mean? Like, why can't they make a movie where we have an interracial gay couple with a daughter, but it's just like a regular horror movie that's well written, that scares you without jump scares. I hate jump scares. Like, just tell a good story. Like, have you ever seen The Others? Mm-mm. One of the best horror, like Nicole Kidman, really, really great writing, clever movie. And you could make these movies with diverse casts and characters and all that stuff, and it would still be a great movie. Instead, what they do is they write social justice, like letters to social justice for you, and then they call it a horror movie.
And if you had a black horror movie, it'll be a really short horror movie because everyone knows that black people die first. it'll be like the opening credits, boom, click, and ending crawl. But seriously though, but what you're saying is one thing that I've been beating on in public is that this idea of, there is a universal human experience, and you can have, a gay interracial couple, but as long as it's rooted in, like, if it's a horror movie, we want to see what they do to survive and get out alive. How do they use their wits, their strength? How do they survive this ordeal? Oh, they don't. Well,
the evil white immortal people. A spoiler alert, but I've spoiled the movie already before. Basically, what they say, they explain is that every 10 years they trick marginalized people into coming into the town, so that they can sacrifice them for immortality.
Oh, come on, man. It's
just like very, very over the top. Like, I get it.
Well, because here's my thing, and I say, like, I made a tweet about, like, I never got into acting to be an activist. And there are too many people now, I feel like, who are saying that we want to send a message. We want to inject our activism into the story, where it would probably be more effective if you focused more on story craft and telling a good story. Two examples that I use often, movies that came out around the same time, indie films. One was called Pariah, which is a coming-of-age story about a young black lesbian in New York City. The other was called Gun Hill Road, which is a coming-of-age story about a young, like a 16-year-old Latino male who is transitioning into female. And you see all these sort of awkward interactions, first love, first kisses, how it affects the family. And it's like, okay, like we see that now. I can relate to that. I'm looking at a slice of life that I don't really understand or that I don't necessarily identify with. But as a human being, I'm sitting there, I'm saying like, oh yeah, the familial strife, the awkwardness of first love, trying to navigate sex and dating, which, it's going to have even more challenges, and we want to see conflict in our drama. That's one of the core tenets of drama. How does this character deal with these new challenges that they're invited into I speak quickly now, that they're inviting into their lives. Like, that's what I want to see. I want to see the human struggle. How do they overcome adversity? I don't want to be preached at and given some sort of message. I don't need to be improved when I go to the movies. I want to experience something.
There's watching like The Grudge. There's no racist narrative when the creature climbs out of the black shadows of the wall and it's like a demon going, and you're like, yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
It's just a creepy movie,
Yeah.
Well, let's do one more super chat, and then we'll jump over to the members-only stuff. Jennifer Reams says, Clifton has the coolest voice ever. He has my vote to narrate the coming Civil War. There you go.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, if you haven't already, smash that like button. Go to timcast.com, become a member, because we're going to have a exclusive members-only segment. We didn't get to a lot of the stories. This often happens. We'll be like, look, we got all these stories, and then we'll just get into the conversation that happens. But over at timcast.com, we will have another one coming up in about an hour or so. So go to timcast.com, become a member, like, share, subscribe. If you really do like this podcast and you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, leave us those good 5 stars. Leave us a great review. It really, really does help. And share it with your friends. The only real way podcasts grow is from word of mouth. But Clifton, you want to mention anything before we go?
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter at Clifton A. Duncan. You can also find me on Instagram at Clifton Duncan Online. I also have a YouTube channel. That's my name, Clifton Duncan, that I'm growing. And, if you're an artist out there and you feel like you are that you're being silenced and that you're afraid, just, reach out to me. And, I'm connecting with all of these people. So many of us are afraid, but, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing in this space that I keep getting drawn into. I'm being urged to create a podcast and do all kinds of things. So just keep a lookout for what I'm up to. And, I'm happy to speak with you all and to visit and stop by. And I appreciate you giving me a chance to run my mouth a little bit.
I love having you here, man. That was awesome.
Hey, man, I enjoyed it.
It's cool.
Except all the creepers that were like, man, his voice is just so, because no one was like, man, he's so smart and what a deep and insightful person. They were like, he just makes me just
superficial.
Tingle.
Yeah,
I know.
You're vibrating.
All you
there,
objectifying people out there, you should be ashamed of yourself. But just keep giving them money, though. So just do that. Thank you.
I love it.
Thanks, dude. Hey, guys, you can follow me on iancrossland.net, and then you can check out all my socials and dig it. I love you all, man. Thanks for coming. This has been really fun.
Very cool. Yeah, great chat with Clifton here. I had a wonderful evening. My socials, I just do Twitter and Minds, and I am Sour Patch Lids on both of those platforms. And then I am also Real Sour Patch Lids on Instagram and Gap.
You can follow me on all social media platforms at Timcast. My other YouTube channels are youtube.com/Timcast, youtube.com/TimcastNews. This show is live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., so we'll be back tomorrow, of course. And it's also my birthday tomorrow.
Oh, snap.
We'll see what happens tomorrow. Like, for all I know, I'll be like just laying there, be like, that's my birthday. I'm not working. But we'll see. We fully intend to have everything as per usual. I'll just wait till the weekend for the celebrations or whatever. But thanks for hanging out. Go to timcast.com because we will have a segment up in about an hour, and we will see you all then.
Bye, guys.